Welcome to the June 9th Board of Selectmen's meeting. This meeting is being taped and it will be shown on Whitman Hanson Cable Access Television. We have a host of folks joining us in addition to the Board of Selectmen, and we have quite a jam-packed agenda. But before we begin, if you could join me in a Pledge of Allegiance, that would be amazing. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And Mr. Bloss, may I ask you to read announcements? Can you hear me?
All right, we're ready?
Yep.
Volunteers are needed on the following committees: Facebook Maintenance Committee, 200th Anniversary, Conservation Commission, 1 regular and 2 associate members, Cultural Council, Disabilities, Economic Development, Finance, Highway Building Committee, Historical Commission, Memorial Day Patriotic Observance, Memorial Field Trustees, North River Commission, and Zoning Board Alternate. Applications for appointment and info on the committee are available on the town website, www.hanson-ma.gov. Upcoming meetings and events. Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020, Board of Selectmen meeting starting at 6 p.m. Saturday, June 27th, annual town election from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Hanson Middle School. Tuesday, June 30th and Tuesday, July 7th, Board of Selectmen meeting starting at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. As I mentioned, we have quite a jam-packed agenda, and Chief Mix, we've got such a host of characters here that I don't actually see everybody, so I'm hoping that Chief Mix is with us. With that, Chief Mix, I know we sent around an email with some documentation from you in preparation for tonight's meeting. And if you could just cue it up. One of the things that Chief Mix is looking for 2 part-time officers, and he'll explain why. Chief, if you could take it away, and then we'll kind of go round robin and see if anybody's got any questions about it.
Okay, I was never referred to as a character before, but thank you. So actually, it's you said 2 part-time. There'll be 1 part-time officer, which I think is the easiest one to explain and deal with right now. What we started doing almost 2 years ago was a part-time program. We've always had what I call special officers. So some of the retired guys or people that have been through the part-time police academy that'll work road jobs for us, the police details, and they're a force multiplier if we need people. But almost 2 years ago, we started doing what we call true part-timers, where we actually put them through our field training program and eventually sign them off. They can work cruiser shifts and really help supplement the officers. That being said, I had 3. One left for the state police. One is in the police academy currently. He will be graduating on June 19th. And one other is just not available to work right now. So I'm basically down to 1 that should be back in the fall, I'm guessing, but I don't have any part-timers that I can put into the field training program to work in the cruiser. So that being said, there's a young man who applied. We actually did this started in late October, early November, and we had to hold off a little bit to deal with this. And then when we were ready to start, COVID-19 came in and we had to put everything on hold. That being said, I have a young gentleman named Kyle Bersani. Kyle's an East Bridgewater resident. He's finishing up his degree, bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Bridgewater State College. He also is a Whitman Police Auxiliary currently. So he has graduated from the Reserve Intermittent Plymouth Police Academy, also known as the Part-Time Academy. And he presently works at the Y as a fitness instructor and assistant there. So we'd like to put him on as a part-timer. Again, this is something that I budget every year to do to train these guys, keep them trained up, and help us offset. The plus is when the full-time guys don't want overtime or things get tight, they'll come in and help us on straight times. That being said, I'd appreciate putting Kyle on so that we can get him rolling, especially where we're going to the regional dispatch June 30th, and once that happens, I'm gonna have a hard time keeping the road covered because I'm losing my 5 civilians, and we're trying to replace them with officers. So having some people that are knowledgeable and trained up will be helpful when we're trying to cover these, so to speak.
Okay, so Chief, I think you and I spoke, and I know you've spoken to Mr. Sullivan, who I'm not sure if Mr. Sullivan, again, we've got so many people on that I'm not sure. But I think one of the things that, we had discussed is, look, we're coming into a difficult year, right? We know we're coming into a difficult year. We've got school issues, COVID-19 funding issues, all kinds of things looming in the distance. So help talk us off the ledge and tell us, this isn't really padding your budget or adding to your budget. If anything, I think the argument that you've made is that this is more cost effective for us, and it helps you build some experience within your ranks so that as people are retiring, you have got people that are ready to step in.
Well, as I already mentioned, I've already lost 2 part-timers, so I'm trying to replace at least one of those 2 that we've lost. They don't cost much. We have to give them, obviously got to give them some equipment, but most of that equipment's stocked here anyways. I have to get them a uniform, and they have to go through a little bit of training. And like I said, once they're signed off, they can work a cruiser shift. Once the sergeants and the field training officers believe that they're capable, we sign them off, and they can supplement or augment the full-time force. Again, with union contracts, I have to offer it to the full-timers first, but there's a fair amount of times that the part-timers, especially, ironically enough, especially around Christmas, that, the full-timers are more than willing to give up that stuff. So they do save me money in the long run. Plus, when they work road jobs, we're getting an administration fee off of them for working that road job that we charge to that contractor. Also, as I just mentioned, I got to keep the station doors open, and once I train these people up, there's a good chance they can be sitting in here and helping to offset some of that that loss of manpower in the station, of personnel in the station.
Okay. So with that, Chief, if you don't mind, I'm just going to kind of go round robin, see if anybody on the board has got any questions for you. If you don't mind obliging. Mr. Dyer.
No questions at this time. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell.
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hickey. Whoops, did we lose Mr. Hickey?
It's true, I don't see him on the board.
Okay. Well, then we'll go to you and maybe he'll join us. Mr. Bloss?
No, no questions. Thank you.
Okay. And is Mr. Sullivan present?
Yes, Laura, I'm here.
Okay, Mr. Sullivan, I know that you had some opinions about this, and I certainly don't want to give those short shrift. So if you would want to share those with us, I think now would be the time.
Yeah, sure. The chief and I have talked through this. I think if this is a sustainable replacement and not in addition to the head count, the department heads run their department. So if the chief feels that he can afford this going forward and it's sustainable, I'm not going to disagree with him. My concern, again, would always be going forward into next year, depending on what happens with the override. Because if we have to start cutting, making headcount adjustments or reductions, it's those kind of part-time people who were brought on first who are the first to go. So, but again, that's for, the chief to determine. I'm just letting reminding everyone that I did not find $800,000 in our budget anywhere. We are still in a significant deficit situation.
Yep. Okay, appreciate that perspective, Mr. Sullivan, and thank you for sharing that with us. Mr. Stanbrook, did you have anything you wanted to add to the discussion?
No, I had talked it over with the chief, and I also talked it over with town accountant Todd Hassett, and I agree with Mr. Sullivan.
Okay, all right, great. With that, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion, Laura. I make a motion that part-time officer Brian Raude be appointed as a student police officer effective August 3rd, 2020. Upon the successful completion of the Plymouth Police Academy, student officer Raude will be appointed as a full-time officer for the town of Hanson. In the town of Hanson, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And I'd just like to add something, excuse me, Madam Chair. I think there's an additional motion I move to appoint Kyle Bersani as a part-time police officer effective June 15th, 2020. Is that correct, Chief?
Yeah, so I touched on Kyle first as a part-timer, and just so everybody understands too, is the part-timers, they don't come into the formula of layoffs because they're per diem. They basically only work when we need them. So they're once we train them, there's no regular schedule. So they're per diem. So let's take that one out. Yeah, Mr. Mitchell jumped ahead of me here. The other appointment we have is Brian Raude. Brian is currently a part-time police officer for us, and he's a full-time civilian dispatcher right now. So Brian, we've lined up to, and we have a slot for him in the August Plymouth Police Academy. This was part of the plan that we've been going forward from when we decided to go regional, that the only way we could staff the station was to replace those it's actually 5.5 civilian positions with 4 sworn positions, 4 law enforcement officers. So Brian is actually a full-time dispatcher, and we managed to get him in the academy in August. So Brian, we're trying to figure out what to do with him for 30 days so the town isn't stuck with a layoff bill here, but that's not overly important at the moment. But so Brian Raude would be taking up that other full-time position that we funded and voted on at town meeting in October. There was a total of 4. He would be the second of those 4. And I have not done anything with the other 2 yet. So that's future things. So right now I just need to take care of Mr. Raude. I got to tell you, he came to us from Situate. Prior to that, he was a special education teacher and tutor, doing before school and after school programs, as well as teaching in Hanover, and as a special needs or special ed teacher, mainly working with kids with autism. And then Situate couldn't speak highly enough of him when we stole him from Situate to dispatch for us. He's been an outstanding employee, and I think sending him to the police academy will have one heck of a police officer going forward.
Yeah, that sounds like an incredibly fortunate, set of experiences that he's had. And of course, a lot of police, forces are dealing with how do we integrate and work with people with autism. And so that really sounds like a special skill set that he's got and he's bringing to the table. Okay, Mr. Mitchell, did you want to amend your extremely timely motion?
Yeah, so there's 2 different motions. You want them each separately, or you want them both together?
I think probably for the sake of clarity, let's do each of them individually.
Okay, so let's do Kyle first. I make a motion that Mr. Kyle Bersani be appointed as a part-time police officer in the town of Hanson.
Second.
Okay. And Mr. Hickey, I know we lost you for a bit, so before we move to the vote, did you have any questions or comments? I want to make sure that, whatever those might be are included.
I'm all set, Laura. Actually, as soon as I lost the internet connection, I jumped on the phone.
Okay,
So I
awesome.
was able to hear the chief loud and clear on that, so I'm good.
Okay, awesome. Great. Okay, with that, we'll go to a roll call vote because we've got it moved and seconded. So Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Bloss,
Aye.
Ms. Kemet, aye. And Mr. Mitchell,
I make a
Another-
motion, part-time officer Brian Raude be appointed as a student police officer effective August 3rd, 2020. Upon the successful completion of the Plymouth Police Academy, student officer Raude will be appointed as a full-time police officer in the town of Hanson.
do I have a second out there?
I'll second. Jim?
Okay. Roll call vote again, Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Bloss,
Aye.
and Ms. Kemet, aye. Okay, well, thank you, Chief, and we look forward to hearing about these guys and their progress and all that good news. So we appreciate you joining us and bringing this to us.
Thank you very, very much. They're both going to be very excited.
All right, well, we're excited. Thank you. Take care. Next up on the agenda is the permission to hold a vigil at Town Hall. And I believe we received an email from one of the organizers, it's a group of organizers, but saying that originally they were thinking that they wanted to do it this Sunday, but I think now sort of discovering the depth and breadth of the organizing that's required, they'd like to propose moving that to the 19th from 5 to 6. And so I don't know if this is, I think it's up at Town Hall. They've been in contact with Chief Mix about it. It's going to be a vigil, and I think more details to be, released. At this point, I don't think they have a sense of how many people, but that is something that Chief Mix has asked that as soon as they get some sense of the numbers that they keep in contact with him and so that he can appropriately staff. Did anybody have any questions about that?
Mr. Chair, it's Matt.
Yes, Mr. Dyer.
When I was going through Dropbox, I didn't see any information other than the one line of it was a visual. I'm sure I know what it may be, but can you just tell us what the visual is about and who's the organizer for everyone at home and myself?
Yes, so it's a group of organizers, and it is, and it may be more than these people, but these are the people that I think were the originators of it. Juvie Hartwig, who we know and love from the Recreation Commission, Arlene Diaz, and actually several of these people may actually be on the call today. Arlene Diaz from the Board of Health. And of course, these are not their only talents and the only things that they're known for, but these are the ways that they're known to us. And then Mary Ann Damasio of the Plymouth County Reuse Committee and many others. So the three of them are spearheading this. And in terms of, the, I don't know, the mode or what it's going to be, I think the last I spoke with them, they, I think, are going to try to model it after the Whitman vigil, which was quite successful and was held, I believe, this past Sunday. It was quite peaceful. It had some speakers, and it was over in a very short period of time. So I don't know if that answers all of your questions.
It does, thank you.
Okay, great. And Juvie or Arlene, are you on the phone?
A non-drowsy antihistamine plus a powerful decongest.
Deb, can you mute your phone there? We're getting a lot of background noise. Okay, Juvie, was that you?
It's Arlene.
Okay, Arlene.
I'm not
do
sure
you have
if she's on the call.
Okay, do you have anything else that you wanted to add beyond what I just mentioned?
No, I don't know if anybody has any other questions. We did only want to do it for an hour at Town Hall Green. And if we did anything, we'd have speakers and then just maybe walk around the green there. So it wouldn't go off-site anywhere. It's just a matter of getting people together to talk about the issues that have come up recently and how we can learn to communicate better and a variety of other things, but mostly that, to show that people can we can begin to work together and to begin to work toward some changes.
Okay, thanks, Arlene.
Sort of our purpose.
Did anybody else have any questions? Okay, then I will, I'm sorry, Matt, was that you?
Yep.
Yes, Mr. Dyer.
I guess with Arlene being on the phone and being one of the organizers, what, through you, Ms. Chair, what precautions are we taking for social distancing and having a gathering at Town Hall?
If it's at Town Hall, it would be sort of, we would plan to be in the same area where the concerts used to be. So there's plenty of distance there. There's plenty of space there for people to sort of social distance. We'll plan on bringing a microphone and some systems so that people can hear, so they don't need to be close. But there's plenty of opportunity for people to socially distance. It's a big area.
But Arlene, are you planning on, for instance, having masks available if people show up and don't have masks? Are you going to enforce the 6 foot, social distancing? And then I think just to build on what Matt has asked, I would also ask that, and I think this is probably implied and understood, but just to say it out loud, I'd also like no trace left behind, to the extent people are bringing water bottles or things to eat or what have you. That there's nothing that we're left to clean up.
Right. And I think part of once we send a message out, people have to come wearing a mask. In any gathering, at this point, you have to wear a mask. And we would make sure that they socially distance. That is not a problem. And I will find out where the trash, I know where one of the trash containers is, but we will put also something in there saying that if you bring anything onto the property, sort of like camping, you take it with you when you leave.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Dyer, does that satisfy your questions?
It does. Thank you. And thank you, Arlene.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Mr. Mitchell, any questions?
Nope, none at this time.
Okay, great. Mr. Hickey?
Nope, I'm set. My only question for Eileen, but she answered it, was that they're going to be staying on the green. Even if they do a small parade, it's going to be on the premises and not on the street. So.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yes, good point, Mr. Hickey, because they are not applying for a parade permit. So whatever we discussed tonight, that's not what we're permitting. And I think Arlene and Juvie and Marianne all appreciate that would be far more complicated than what they're asking for. Mr. Bloss?
No, thank you.
Okay, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second time, Matt.
Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Dyer?
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell?
Aye.
Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Bloss?
Aye.
And Ms. Kemet, aye. Okay, Arlene, thank you. I know you're on for other things as well. And Mr. Clark, in the interest of not torturing you by making you sit through several other things that we're going to talk about that I think are going to take a lot longer than probably your piece of the puzzle here, I'm going to take the liberty of juggling around our agenda just a bit to discuss the vote to open parks and fields for practices as part of Governor Baker's Phase 2 reopening plans. Wow, that's quite an agenda item. So, with that, we've got Ms. Diaz from the Board of Health. And Mr. Clark, if you could introduce yourself in the context, I know most people know who you are, but just for the sake of posterity, if you could mention who you are and what capacity you're here.
Sure. My name is Paul Clark. I'm a resident of Hanson. I've been on I'm the president of the Hanson Little League. This is my second year as president. I've been on the board for 9 years. And we're here tonight to see what we need to do to get the fields open so that the kids can hopefully start practicing and playing.
Okay, I know the guys are crawling the walls. Kate, could you let us know what is the guidance? I believe that we're able to open up to practices, but not scrimmages or actual games for youth sports. Is there any other clarification?
There we go. Yeah, so exactly. What they're trying to prevent is close contact. So the scrimmages where people are going to be coming together, touch football and all of those things are not appropriate. So try to maintain social distancing, and there are particular reopening guidelines. It makes sense to post so I'm not sure where the fields are, if they're fenced or how that works in Hanson. But you've got to post the reopening signs, letting people know that they have to keep apart from one another, etc. So
They are fenced. Yeah, they are fenced. Well, right now we're talking about youth baseball. So this is the only sport that's coming to us, talking to us about it. Others don't have fences, for instance, soccer. But I guess we'll cross those bridges when we get to them.
Yeah. So, I mean, generally what it is, the fields can be used, but you can't have the scrimmages or the games that you normally would have in the facility, the area that's fenced off here, the baseball field. But they can be opened. It just has to be done safely.
Okay. And Mr. Clark, I assume that, if given the green light, or perhaps you've already done this, that you'll meet with all the adult volunteers and lay down the rules of engagement, just make sure that, everybody is abiding by those rules.
Yes, we not only have we had several board meetings, we kind of knew what was going to be involved in phase 2. So we know what we need to do, but we're going to make sure that all parents, but first of all, going to let all parents know what the deal is, that they have to, the social distancing. We have all the criteria that both the state has given us and National Little League. So the parents are going to know that we're going to encourage people to bring their own equipment. In years past, for people who don't have the means, we do have extra equipment that we will make available to those kids who need them, but we are making it widely known to all the parents of what the social distancing is. We're going to have signs. I know that the state wants you to come in one direction and go out. As far as the scrimmages, we're not going to have the kids play against each other like the rules stated. We're going to have small groups. The coaches will have masks. We have plenty of hand sanitizer. All coaches will have the masks. We're going to encourage the kids to bring masks. We will have the separate areas so that people will know where the parents can sit and the kids will sit. We're not going to have any kids in the dugout at all.
Okay. Yeah, good. Yeah.
In either phase 2 or phase 3. So we're being extra cautious, and we're using not only the state guidelines, but also the Little League, which have been very helpful.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're taking it quite seriously, which is appreciated. If you don't mind, Mr. Clark, I'm just going to go around and see if the board has any questions or concerns, and we'll just take it from there. Mr. Dyer?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mitchell?
Yes, through Parks and Fields, Laura, we've been really working the past couple of weeks with not only baseball with Mr. Clark, but also girls softball as well, Tim Young. So I got the guidelines from the state through the Board of Health, passed that along. Paul actually came to my office last week, picked them up, and I'm extremely confident that, they're going to be able to do what they need to do. We've had several conversations over the past week about it, and I feel real confident that I haven't spoken from anybody from soccer, but girls softball and also baseball are prepared to move forward during this phase 2.
Okay, and Mr. Clark, do you speak for softball? I mean, I don't know if you guys collaborate or what exactly that looks like.
We do not collaborate, but just one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that I know that people might have questions about, people being concerned. We sent an email out last week offering people refunds who signed up. And first of all, I want to make it clear, we got rid of the youngest division, so we're not going to have the 4-year-olds. But of all the people who we have offered to get money, out of the over 200 kids who have signed up, less than 10 people have decided not to play. And in matter of fact, we've getting kids who ordinarily wouldn't play, but they weren't able to play in high school as freshmen. So we're having an increase in the amount of seniors. So people are definitely want to get out, and we realize it's our responsibility to be as diligent as possible with the safety requirements.
Okay, well, I always appreciate all of the hard work that I know you do on baseball. I've heard your name for years and all of the good work that you do, so we appreciate that. Now, Mr. Mitchell, I must admit that, Mr. Clark is here and, representing what his organization has done, and I'm hearing you say that softball is too, but I'm just one person, but I would really like to have seen them physically here to get those same assurances from them. But I'll go around to the rest of the board. Others may not feel the same. Mr. Hickey.
Hey, Paul and I actually spoke in length, and what I was impressed with was, and Paul, you can probably explain it better than I, and I know you're putting the 4-year-olds on a hiatus for this year, but I would consider it a new program with, I'm not sure if they still call them peewees, but those younger teams that it's instructional, t-ball, that type of thing. Would you mind just telling us, because I think this is a great idea, but 1 or 2 minutes on what you're doing with those programs?
Sure. Usually with t-ball, the main concern is, for those of you who have had t-ball children, I've suffered through 2 of them, is when the batter hits the ball, it's like a swarm of bees. There's like 10 kids are trying to get onto the ball. We're not going to do that this year. What we're going to do is for those lower levels, it's going to be more of an instructional process. So it may say that the A's are playing the Mariners, but the A's and Mariners really aren't going to be playing each other. What it will be is the A's will be out in the outfield doing drills, and the other team will be, in the infield doing those drills, and then we'll switch around. So it's not going to be, it's a different year this year, so it's more of an instructional as far as those kids are concerned.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Mr. Hickey. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, awesome. Mr. Boss?
Nope, I trust Paul, and if Ken's confident, I'm confident then, okay.
Okay, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second by Matt.
Okay, and just for clarity's sake, are we saying softball and baseball? I don't know who originally moved things. I think it was Jim.
What, Kenny, you would being involved with Parks and Fields may have a better understanding on this, but right now with the new phase, it's only for practicing.
That's
There
correct.
there are no games yet.
That's correct. And until it's looking like probably maybe the 29th, the governor may change that, but right now it's only practices. But I would say for girls softball, for baseball, and the only other, the high school field, that's in Hanson. So, I don't know if we want to put that as part of it as well.
Who would be using that, Mr. Mitchell?
I don't know, but it's a field that's in Hanson, and the high school would be the one that would oversee that.
Okay, I mean, I think that we may make an exception tonight with softball not being here, but I think that we need to have, at this point, we need to have groups come to us and talk to us so that we can vet their readiness. And, there will come a point when we don't need to approve people using the field, or we just make, like across the board approval that everybody can use the fields as they have in the past. But I don't know what others think, whether you guys just want to grant permission across the board for the use of the baseball fields and not vet this. Really, I think let me see how I posted this. I just want to make sure that we're not unwittingly. Okay, yeah, it's broad enough. I think we could, we could discuss it if you want.
Yeah, it's totally up to, I don't know what the high school guys going on. I just assumed we were doing it to all fields, but that's okay. If you want each group to come in, then that's fine. But I'm confident with Little League Baseball and also girls softball.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. It sounds like you've talked to them and vetted it. So, Mr. Dyer? Thoughts?
I think as long as the Board of Health is okay with them as well, I think there's an application that everyone has to fill out. Arlene, is that right?
Sorry, say that again?
Is there an application that like each business or each entity that would like to open up has to have like a COVID plan, little application that they submit to Board of Health, or am I thinking of
It's
something
not
else?
an application. It's not an application, but they do have to have a plan. They do have to have
But
a
like, but
plan.
for not businesses, Arlene, but the baseball, softball, like what do they need to
No.
present to you?
I was just looking at the what was needed for them, and it was just that they had to, before they go on the field, when they come off the field, they have to use hand sanitizer. They have to do the social distancing. There wasn't other requirements other than that, and it just mentioned the things they can't do. You know, no contact, no games, and I don't think they have to come to the Board of Health to do
Okay,
that.
but there's nothing that jumps out about this that gives you cause for
No.
concern.
No.
Okay,
No,
All right.
nope, because he did say they have the hand sanitizer, and it's explicit that they have to use it before they go on the field and as soon as they come off the field.
yes, Mr. Clark said he got both the National Little League guidance and the state guidance, so I think he's all
Right.
over it.
We actually, not to bore you, but we did, this is a state, we submitted something to the state. And I sent both Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Hickey a copy of our plan that we made. And it basically just reiterates what the state asked us to do. So we are gonna have a poster that will have, that the state has recommended. It's just basically saying what was just said, that it's gonna be the thorough cleaning and the hand sanitizer, basically advertising everything that I've gone over tonight, that we're gonna have signage at the fields for that.
All right, great, thank you, Mr. Clark. So I thought we started to entertain a motion and then we kind of went down a primrose path, so I'm not quite sure. Did we have a motion for softball and baseball, and was it seconded?
You had a motion for both, but it hadn't been seconded,
Okay,
I believe.
I'll second it.
okay. And then roll call vote. Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Bloss,
Aye.
and Ms. Kemet, aye. And thank you, Mr. Clark. Sorry we tortured you, but we appreciate your diligence and we appreciate your dedication. And I'm sure there's going to be some happy little guys and gals out there when they hear that they're going to be able to get out and play.
Thank
So-
you. I appreciate it, and it wasn't that torturous. So,
All right, we'll take that as a challenge the next time you're here.
thank you.
Okay,
Have a good
take
night.
care. You too. Okay, and that brings us to Board of Health update. And Ms. Diaz, I did hear you, and we were wondering if you have got an update on Phase 2 reopening plans.
No, at this point, I think it looks as if the biggest impact we're gonna have is phase 2, part 2, which is, I'm assuming, is gonna be around the 29th.
Okay,
I don't think there's a huge impact. I don't think phase 2, the first part of it is gonna have a huge impact because I don't think we have a lot of restaurants that have the capacity to do outside seating. We probably have one in Hanson. So I
well,
think at this
actually,
point, it's
no,
really-
we've got two. We've got the hitching post. Andrea built that a couple of years ago off of the back of the hitching post. And then Meadowbrook
Okay.
most recently, I don't know if they're completely finished with it, but they do have it there. Then we also have Connie's, who spoke to me and said that he has always had outdoor seating, just, very casual, a couple
Right.
of benches. And then in addition to that, I couldn't help but notice that Moe's had put some picnic benches out in their parking lot. So it appears we have 4, Ms. Diaz, as
You
of
know what?
today.
Moe's, when they closed, they were working on that deck. So,
Okay, yeah,
those are the only things that we would have to focus on. I think right now, there's not a lot of other businesses that are opening up, but I think the end of the month, it's going to open more. I'm hoping maybe 50%. It's a guess. There's no way of knowing what the governor's going to do, but the numbers continue to go down each day, which is what they wanted. So I would think by the end of this month, they really should be able to open up. And I know it's not fast enough for people, but we have to make sure that our numbers aren't going to go up with too many people congregating.
Okay, and so I had on the agenda a vote to consider allowing outside dining pursuant to governor's order, liquor licensing and zoning. And so it's another reason why we have Ms. Feardoff here this evening is, I would think that as a board would generally want to support our local restaurants in pushing the envelope a little bit, because for this particular phase, where they've had their dining room shut down, some have continued to do takeout throughout the pandemic, but some have not. They just either didn't feel comfortable or they didn't have, the logistical things in place that they thought that they could do that, or perhaps they just decided that they didn't feel safe. But for whatever reason, now we're at a juncture where we're able to support these small businesses, these little floundering restaurants, which have a very thin, profit margin already, and hopefully push the boundaries a bit to support them in having outdoor dining. So, Kate, with that, can you queue up what I know that some of the zoning requirements, which is why we have got Mr. Curran and Deb Petty here, have been relaxed, and some of the liquor license laws have been relaxed. Can you tell us what power have we got to try to help these guys get on their feet?
Yeah, so essentially the governor's order is really pretty broad, and there's legislation pending which sort of mirrors the governor's order, and the last check that hasn't gone through yet. But essentially what it's trying to do is create some flexibility where there otherwise was not, because depending upon your town, and I don't know in Hanson if you require a special permit or some other type of zoning relief for outdoor dining specifically, but other zoning elements can be triggered if you, for example, use a portion of your parking lot, thereby reducing the number of parking spaces which are theoretically required for the operation of your business. You may create a zoning violation. So all of those things can be essentially waived through a streamlined application process, and not have those same public hearing requirements that are triggered under Chapter 40A, which is the Zoning Act. Same thing with liquor. So liquor licenses, when you apply for a liquor license, you give a very descriptive plan of what the premises look like. So up to the tables that you have inside, where your bartender service is, all that kind of stuff. It's very a detailed description, and only in those specific areas can you serve alcohol. And if you want to amend your liquor license, you have to go through the hearing process before the Board of Selectmen, but then also wait for approval from the alcohol ABCC. So that piece has been waived too. And in order to accomplish approval of these outdoor seating areas, you have to create a policy through the Board of Selectmen. And I have some templates which say, they put some restrictions on there. Number one, make sure you're ADA compliant, right? Because that hasn't been waived. What else? Maybe change the hours. So normally if you can sell liquor until 2 a.m., now because it's outside and the consequential impacts to the neighbors are different when you're eating and drinking outside, you may want to modify the hours. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to deal with these restaurants who have been struggling, clearly, or struggling is kind of minimizing what's happened. And it gives you some flexibility. So then the third option is, I heard you say there are 3 restaurants in town that perhaps have the capacity within their own space, whether it be through a deck or the parking lot or whatever. You can also, depending upon several factors, license portions of the sidewalk. So if you have like a cafe or something, and you can allow little tables to be set up on the sidewalk, and that would be a separate license. It's not a lease of the property because that's too much of a property right where you need town meeting approval, but you could license it for a limited period of time until indoor seating is allowed under, as Arlene suspects probably correctly, at the end of this month. Or longer. The zoning relief, the liquor relief can extend to November 2nd unless the governor rescinds his order. So there's a lot of flexibility there and creative ways to deal with it. I have some towns that are saying, and it really is so fact specific. I don't know where the restaurants are in Hanson, but like I have one town where they have a couple of restaurants centrally located, so they're actually shutting down part of the street to street traffic and having it only one way for cars, and they're using the street area for seating. They thought about making it pedestrian only for a portion, but then it worked out not so well for the other businesses in the neighborhood. But it's an opportunity there to help some struggling businesses.
Yeah, these are located along Route 27 and 58, so those probably, that wouldn't be really an option for us, but I love that idea, but I don't think practically speaking that would be appreciated. So what's our next step here if we want to try to help people? I'm hearing you say we need a policy, and then I thought I read something saying that once we adopt that policy, we could delegate to somebody to approve, acceptance of some of these restaurants being given permission to do this.
Yeah, so certainly the zoning piece you can definitely designate, because what the governor's order speaks to is the policy created by the Board of Selectmen, and you can do that. However, you can delegate it to Bob or the town administrator, or the town administrator with the following approvals from these, from building, planning, et cetera, Concom, whatever you think might be triggered, fire, police. The liquor is less clear. There's not an express delegation possibility in the governor's order, but we are taking a broad read of it to say that the whole intent of this, right, the waiver of the advertising requirements, the waiver of the public hearing, it's all intended to expedite the reopening in this kind of safe way. And so we're saying a delegation is probably the most efficient thing rather than dealing with the open meeting law and posting a meeting. If sidewalks, however, were to be licensed, or other town property, I don't know if there's a restaurant near a school or whatever, the license can only be approved to use public spaces by the Board of Selectmen. But the other approvals, so the liquor license, the zoning relief, can all be done through a delegate. Now, and I also want to be clear for anyone who's listening at home or subsequently will be listening, it's for those folks who have a food permit through the Board of Health to serve on premise, and also they do food preparation on premise. So it's not intended for your bars or clubs. Even if they serve peanuts in a package, it's intended for really for food service, and then you get the benefit of being able to have an alcoholic drink as well while you're having it.
Okay, and so Mr. Curran, are you still with us?
I am.
What are your thoughts on this? And have you discussed this with Whitman, and what are they doing over there if you have?
We don't have a lot of requests in Whitman. However, I think O'Toole's Pub is asking to extend their table space outside. Currently, they have just 4 tables that can accommodate 4 people at each one. But we do have Meadowbrook, and I was there yesterday. I believe there's 6 or 7 tables outside. Yep. They do have social distancing. However, they are licensed to have, their liquor license includes service out on this deck area.
Yes, yep.
My take on this is that in normal process to expand dining area to outside would go to the Board of Appeals for site plan approval. But according to what I'm reading on the governor's orders, that kind of has been pushed off to the Board of Selectmen, at least temporarily.
That's exactly right. It's that whole process triggered either by local bylaw implicating zoning is essentially waived. What isn't waived, and Bob can speak to this, is if you're going to have a canopy, a tent, that may require, depending upon your tent, a building permit. So the state building code hasn't been waived. So that may, you may have to pull a permit if you're pulling up a nice big tent. And secondly, if you do have a tent and it has sides, so if it's a rainy night, you want to prevent the rain from coming in sideways, only 2 of those sides can be covered, because it says 50% of the perimeter have to be open, because obviously that would, a full enclosure would defeat the purpose of outdoor seating, right? So there are some nuances there. And I have, if the board is inclined to consider pursuing this, I have some templates to make it very easy, stipulating those kind of factors. You have to be ADA compliant, socially distant, so 6 feet apart the tables and all that.
Okay. Mr. Curran, do you have any concerns with enforcement, or like what, in your ideal world, how would this look if we have a restaurant who wants to expand, say maybe I'm the hitching post and I want to expand. I've only got my little deck that is already approved. I've already just got my little deck, but I'd maybe like to bust out into the parking lot a bit and add a few more tables. Thoughts, like what should that process look like? Because I want to try to be mindful and respectful of your vantage point on this.
As far as the businesses that exist now, their parking is limited only because their occupancy load has been reduced significantly. So parking is not going to be an issue. My concern would be, I have no issue at all with them expanding into the parking area, provided there's barriers sufficient to provide safety.
Okay.
Oh, good point, Bob. Yeah. So especially if you're selling liquor, you have to follow the ABCC patio guidelines, which specify the barriers that you have to designate what the area is where people are consuming alcoholic beverages. And the board could also consider, okay, maybe I want to step that up if it's a dangerous situation. I don't know, it's a busy parking lot or it's a shared parking lot, and the barriers may have to be a little stronger based on individual needs of the certain properties. So good point, Bob.
Okay, and so I'm just trying to figure out how do we move this ball forward so that we can respond quickly if people, if restaurants contact us. What I don't want is to get caught up in some red tape quagmire where it's going to take us a month to respond and the damage has already been done because they can't pivot to, do what they want to do.
Laura, I think the best plan for this is to have them submit a site plan to the Board of Selectmen, and you have it try to be accommodating to them for their meetings.
Okay.
Police chief would be involved with any safety concerns. If there is any tents at all, they will need a building permit, and the flame rating of the tent material is all part of what I will look at.
Okay.
But my feeling is that the Board of Selectmen should be super responsive, provided they get a site plan that makes sense.
And I can provide you, when is your next meeting, Laura?
I believe it's the 23rd.
Oh, so I could give you a couple of templates tomorrow that you guys could look at. And it does provide for, if you want to streamline the process and delegate, it gives a delegation option. Again, you can give it to the town administrator and he'll have the various departments sign off before he signs. That's been the most common approach that I've seen. And then you don't have to have an open meeting for each and every application that comes before you. And what we've done for the planning piece is we've been even more flexible than we would for site plan to say, well, they can do it a sketch drawing, which is not as exact as I would want for a site plan. But they know the dimensions of their parking lot and what they're gonna reserve for the outdoor seating and things of that nature. I don't know if, Bob, you think that would be reasonable?
Yes, I do. Well, we have site plans for most businesses anyway, so we could help provide that.
Oh, perfect.
Okay. All right. So I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I want to make sure we're ready. If somebody comes to us tomorrow and says, which I think is going to happen, I don't know if it will literally be tomorrow, but within the next week or so, and as they start to get their sea legs and they're starting to open up outside, I think they're going to say, okay, I can handle this, and I actually could expand my capacity, and I kind of think I know how many people are going to come and what I need, and I kind of want to expand into the parking lot. Most of them, that's really the only place that they'd be able to expand. You'll give us the suggested template, and then we have to meet to adopt that, and then we need to decide to delegate that to maybe Mr. Stanbrook in consultation with Ms. Petty and Mr. Curran, or is that okay?
That's an option.
The other
Mr.
option is
Stanbrook, go ahead, Bob. Yeah.
You could have a checklist where you list the fire department, police department, board of health, and building, and selectman's office. And if everybody approves of it, you just send it to the. Do you feel as though, Kate, that we have to have a public hearing for each one?
No, not at all. You don't have to have a public hearing. What needs to happen is the policy. So if we wanted to expedite it and be able to take in applications as early as tomorrow, I mean, you could determine who to delegate the responsibility for approval to. And I heard you say John, so let's just use him for the moment. John, subject to the sign off of the key players, police, fire, building, planning. I don't think Concom tends to be implicated because it's a paved space anyway, but you know, and say subject to the applicable requirements that the town administrator finds appropriate, and then I can give John my template and it will be approved. Or you could wait and see the policy itself with the application and decide from there.
I mean, but we're not meeting until the 23rd, so then that's like, okay, wow, how responsible are we being? And then, you know, by the time we talk about it and execute it, Mr. Bloss, are you raising your hand? I can't see everybody on. Yeah.
Can I move, because we can still we can continue the discussion. Can I move that we delegate John, Mr. Stanbrook, to facilitate allowing outdoor dining pursuant to the state regs and the licensing and zoning, as Kate has mentioned, and that this checklist that Kate will provide tomorrow can be the template by which Mr. Stanbrook and Mr. Curran and so forth, everybody makes the decision for us.
Yeah,
thank you, Mr. Bloss. And Mr. Stanbrook, you know, I was going to say not to put you on the spot, but clearly I am. You know, if it's not you, is it Deb? Is it Bob? I don't know who. You know, it just seems like you were the tie that binds in terms of, you know, coordination, and maybe it could be Greer helping you to coordinate, but you're the, you know, the actual arbiter of the whole thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I would think that if we used Kate's template and then we had the checkoff list of what we were talking about earlier, I think that would work out fine, and it would come to me, and once everyone's checked off and we've done everything that we're supposed to do, I'm really all just checking to make sure everything has been done. Once it's been done, it's been approved. So I think that would be the way to do it, that we could, you know, if you wanted to get things going right away, if you think people are coming forward quickly. I don't know if they will or not, but.
I don't know if they will, but I just want to be ready. So it's been moved, and could I get a second on that?
Second.
Okay. Thoughts, Mr. Dyer?
Nope, I like what Kate had laid out. So thank you very much for your insight on that, Kate. And I, as I said, I support Wes's motion.
Okay. Did anybody want to discuss or have any further discussion about this? Okay, hearing none, then I will move to the vote. Mr. Dyer, roll call vote.
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell.
Aye.
Mr. Hickey.
Aye.
Mr. Bloss.
Aye.
Okay, great. And Ms. Emmett, aye. Okay, great. So that brings us to back to Recreation Committee presentation of reopening plans for Camp Kewanee. So I think we've got a bunch of people that are joining us, and I'm not sure who's speaking for the Recreation Commission. Diane, is that you?
That was the Recreation Director, Bill Boyle.
Oh, okay.
I think Diane's on here somewhere as well.
Okay, and so can we just get folks to identify themselves? Diane, are you present?
I am present, thank you.
Okay, and John Zuko, I thought I saw you chime in at some point here. Maybe not. I might have
Brian,
been, I thought.
presenting.
Okay, Brian and Joan, are you?
Yep, he is
Okay,
here.
great.
I'm here.
And Melissa?
No, Melissa and Juvie are not here. John is here, but apparently not at his computer to answer.
Okay, great. And then Mr. Boyle. Okay, Mr. Boyle, go ahead, kick it off. We're here to discuss reopening plans for Camp Kewanee and the Cove, I should add, and probably more importantly, the Cove than Camp Kewanee at this point.
So we can just jump right into the Cove, because I know that's probably the bigger area of discussion at heart right now. I mean, in terms of opening, so I met with our health agent, Amato, last week. And in the packet that I sent to you guys, so I do have the email from him stating, in our meeting, in pursuant to, Governor Baker's order number 13, based on the fact that the Cove is a fenced-in area, it would be considered a confined space, which right now is a gathering of no more than 10 people. I know that there's also another memorandum out there about coastal and inland beaches, and so right now it's up for discussion whether or not the Cove is allowed to go to that 12-foot rule of from the beach towels, and no more than 10 person per kind of beach towel. But that would get very tricky very quickly down at the Cove. If we've got 10 people per towel, if we've got 5 towels down on the ground, we could potentially have 50 people in there, which I think could certainly pose some social distancing issues.
Okay, and so that's part of the reason why we have Ms. Feardoff here this evening. You're here for so many reasons this evening, Kate. And so hoping you can chime in on what you think is applicable to the Cove.
Yeah, so what I understand it from the Cove in terms of the setup is that it's a beach area, and it isn't an enclosed space, but it's a beach with sand and then obviously the swimming area. So I view that as an inland beach. And in terms of the layout of the sand, that's a critical piece. So it's how is it described to me, a horseshoe shape. And to me, I read the inland beach regulations to limit it to groups of 10 people, but it's not one group of 10 people, but groups of 10 people, provided those particular groups can stay apart from one another. So if I'm getting any of that factually incorrect, someone correct me. But I view it as an inland beach if it is as I described it. And I think you can have groups of 10 people. Now, how many groups really depends upon your square footage, because I pull out the guidance now, and it's unlike the 6-foot distance that we've all been dealing with over the past 3 months. It's actually a 12-foot distance between groups, so double the size, because you want to be able to accommodate the traffic between the towels when you're going to the swimming area, et cetera, all that jazz. So, whether or not you can have one group or 20 group really depends upon the size and square footage of the beach itself.
Okay, so do we know the square footage of the beach area?
I do not offhand know the square footage of the beach.
Okay.
And it doesn't.
Is it something that would be accessible through planning, or?
Oh, sorry, I stepped on you, Billy.
Is that something that we could either get through planning or even down at Lee's office? Like, I don't, would that be an assessing or?
I don't have anything in planning on the beach per se. I'm thinking that maybe the assessor's map, we could scale it off. Definitely, that's about the only information I would have. I'm thinking it's maybe 8,000 square feet would be my guess, 10,000 square feet, but without really scaling it off, it's hard for me to say.
It's okay. Not tidal at all, right? It's staying exactly where it is all the time, right?
Yeah,
Correct.
it's not
Yeah, I
titled.
mean, it
Yeah.
evaporates a little bit, so, but yeah, it doesn't move with the tides or anything.
I mean, this isn't science, you know, I mean, well, it's totally science, but, but it doesn't have to be as exact. So I think going out there with a tape measure and really seeing, because especially with the horseshoe shape, the total square footage sometimes doesn't make a difference. So you may have a narrow piece, right, where you don't, at the entrance, if I'm envisioning it a certain way, where you don't want people sitting, even though it could accommodate a space for 10 people, that narrow piece, because it's the entrance and you want people to pass and repass, that might not be appropriate. So I think it's got to be a pretty organic process to try to figure out where and how people can sit, given that it's not a square or a rectangle. It's a little bit more tricky.
Just a moment. Mr. Dyer had something he wanted to chime in with. Mr. Dyer?
Right at the moment, according to Google, it's about 0.3 acres. Give me a quick second to do to square feet. And it's about 13,000 square feet.
Okay, Deb wasn't too far. She was like 10,000 square feet, something like that. Okay, so given that, do we feel as though we are not looking at a regulation of 10 people in a 13,000 square foot area?
Yeah, I think you're pretty well above the 10-person limit.
Okay. So how do we extrapolate how far above that we are? I guess.
Yeah, is there a way to tell how many people were allowed, or? I mean, I have the rough numbers that I sent that I can just kind of rattle off based on, you know, just last year and what it's going to take just to break even down there. We can go over that too. But if we have like an actual number to work with, that would certainly help as well.
Yeah, I don't, we're talking here about the health regulations and not about the financials, although it is something that obviously should play into it. But I think part of the concern here is we need to try to balance the health and safety of everyone with the need for people to have that recreation, like we just heard from the baseball guys and the softball guys. We've got a lot of pent up demand, and a lot of people who are staying home this year are not leaving to go vacationing. So we've got a lot of competing demands that we need to try to balance there. I'm curious, what did the Recreation Commission decide with Ms. Diaz? I know that was the task the last time we met.
So does
Diane go on that one?
Oh, okay.
Does Diane want to go first? And then I have a question.
Sure. We were waiting for more clarification to decide what category the beach actually fell under, whether it was going to be considered an enclosed space or an inland beach. So I thank you very much, Kate, for clearing that up for us. Our plan was to get that clarification, and Billy now will have numbers. We'll go down, we'll cordon off various areas of the beach and see which is the best way to lay out, for lack of better phrasing, I guess, a map of the actual beach property where people can be. I do want to know if there's any clarification on what happens when people go in the water, particularly children. And we have docks down there where there is an actual laid out space where certain age groups usually hang out, you know, because they can't swim in the deeper water. So I was wondering if there was any guidance given by the governor on that.
So not so clear, and frankly, I think the water is pretty a difficult thing to manage, because exactly right, it's pretty hard to socially distance when people are limited to their physical ability to navigate the water, and it doesn't really speak to that. So I'd be hesitant to to give advice on that, because I think the enforcement of that is going to be hard. And I think of the practical situation as if, you know, someone's in trouble, or they go down and they cough and they spit and they do all the things that you shouldn't really be doing right now. It's going to be hard to enforce and manage that piece of it. And I don't have great advice on that. I'm sorry.
Okay, so if we were to open, then we would sort of just make our own policy and clear it with the Board of Health maybe, or have guidance from them?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Get the Board of Health involved to figure out if there's, because maybe there are creative ways that I'm not thinking about that have nothing to do with the law of how you deal with, you know, little kids falling into each other. And I think your approach of going down there and kind of mapping it out is good, because like I said, there can be narrow parts which are more constrained than the general square footage. The square footage isn't as telling. And remember, you have to have the lifeguard stations apart from the folks on the towels. So mark where you have your lifeguard stands and then go out from there. You know, that might be an option. I think to have a visual is probably the most practical approach to deal with it.
That's what I was.
Okay, so I think, so what I'm hearing you say is that we know now which portion of the guidance applies to this, that you folks can go and work with the Board of Health if we give you permission as the people who control the use of town property to go ahead and open. That, I think, is where we're at.
So we're saying though that the fence right now does not matter at all in terms of the regulations.
Because the fence, I'm envisioning in my head, Billy, is like just to prevent access so people aren't drowning there at night. And like, I think of the regular beach at the ocean, and they have, you know, the parking gates that come down, and they have the fences along the dunes so you don't run up on the dunes. And I think that's intended for something different, if I'm envisioning it correctly. It's not a space where you're fenced in so you're closed in together. You know what I mean? But maybe I have a misunderstanding.
Well, yeah, it's pretty much, it's a fence, the sand, and then the woods. So you are wedged between the fence and the woods area.
Yeah, I think it's common with ponds to have that just for the danger, because they're attractive nuisance, right? So you want to prevent children from drowning. That's the point. Right. So I think it just happens to be a fence there, but I think it's really an inland beach, my opinion.
Okay, so I think, is there anybody else from the Recreation Commission that wanted to add to this discussion at all?
I will.
Oh, can you identify yourself?
John Zuko.
Sure, John. Hey, John. Thanks for joining us.
Not a problem. I'm sorry, I'm on a different computer that doesn't have a camera. But there are, I mean, people are swimming there every day. I don't know if anyone knows this. I mean, people are trespassing, swimming, kids are on the docks. So, you know, I don't know how you enforce that or what's going on. If you open, you know, they're going to go there anyway. And then what are you going to tell people? That you're going to tell people that they can't come in because we have enough people swimming already? It's going to be, I don't know.
Well, so those are two different things. I think, you know, I realize people are not abiding by the current rules, which we're not open. And I think those situations are being handled on a case-by-case basis. But as far as enforcement, once the beach opens, I think we really need to do that. And if we don't do it, then we're really compromising the ability for us to open it at all to anybody. I mean, you know, we simply have to have the rules. We're required to. It's not optional. You know, we don't get to pick and choose which one of the rules we enforce and which ones we don't.
Do you think we need an officer there every day?
God, I hope not. I mean, you know, but
$500 a day, that's going to get expensive.
Yeah, I know. Good, Diane.
I just would like to say that I actually think by opening the beach, we have more control over it than not opening it.
Right. Because, so you're saying, you know, because we already know people are using it, and they shouldn't be. At least this way, we're able to say, look, you can't be here these hours, but we are open these other hours. But to simply say we're not open at all and you can't be here at all, I think is, you might as well just bang your head against the wall. That's not gonna probably work.
They just did it at Clear Pond Park in Lakeville because they're kind of in a similar situation to us. And they're just looking at, again, it came down, I think, to them, the numbers. And I know, yes, right now we're talking about the health perspective, and I think we can follow the regulations and all that. I'm looking at it from the health and also the math on it. And no pun intended, we're going to take a bath on opening the season because we've lost the ability for season passes and swim lessons, which equated to about $17,000 last year. So,
Mr. Boyle, I think I'm getting a very strong message from you that you are opposed to opening up the Cove, or at least you want to have it very limited, and I appreciate that. But the reason that we posted this meeting as a joint meeting between the Recreation Commission and the Board of Selectmen is because I really would like to know what the Recreation Commission folks, the people who have been entrusted with this, for the town, what their thoughts are. So we've heard from Mr. Zucco, we've heard from Ms. Cohen, Mr. Frazzetti.
Oh, I have plenty to say, but I'll keep it very brief. At this point, I think I would pass over this if I were you, because and you can shake your head at this when I see you. The Recreation Commission has not even talked about this. We haven't had a meeting. And there are a lot of things. I'm looking down here about towels 12 feet apart, townspeople 6 feet apart, lifeguards have to be 6 feet away from people, masks worn at all times. We still have stumps at that beach, as far as I know. I haven't been there. And you'll need a parking lot attendant to keep the traffic going. You'll need someone on the beach to keep people separated. And you still have the lead lifeguard and or cove director. I mean, you got a lot of safety things just all rolled into one here.
Okay, fair points, Mr. Frazzetti. When are you guys meeting? When's your next meeting as a Recreation Commission?
Bill,
we don't have one scheduled yet. I can coordinate with Ryan to have a meeting, but there's not one scheduled.
Okay, I think, I'm only speaking for myself. I'll go around to the rest of the guys, but I think we'd look for you guys to do pretty much the same thing we just saw the baseball guys do, which is, get into the details, come up with a plan, and then come and talk to us about what the plan is. I think you've gotten a read from Kate tonight on what regulations we think apply, and then I think you've got to work within the confines of those regulations to come up with the rules of engagement for reopening, or make a determination as the commission that you're going to make a proposal to us that you don't reopen. Mr. Dyer, thoughts?
I think it's a really tricky operation to open up with the social distancing component. You have to think about the docks. The docks aren't 6 feet wide or 12 feet wide where people can pass by each other. You have to think about the restrained swimming area as well. It's not like a beach where people can kind of go all the way to the left or all the way to the right. You have several docks that are going to restrain that kind of travel between swimmers. So I think it's a very tricky operation for sure to kind of open up. So I would like the Recreation Commission to kind of do their best to open it up at some point, because I'm a true believer that having a local swimming hole is very important for health of our town. And if we can't open it up, like I said last time, come up with resources for families to go to that are not Camp Kewanee.
Okay, but you do agree that at this point, we're not in a position to take a vote this evening, and that we need a more comprehensive plan, well laid out with, pros and cons, and we need to know that the majority of the Recreation Commission has voted to support whatever that plan is or isn't.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell?
Yeah, I agree with what you just said, Laura. I mean, the last meeting, we all said we clearly wanted a plan, so I don't think there is any plan. It would be unfortunate if it didn't open, but right now, I'm not in a position to make any decisions until I see a clear plan of exactly what's going to go on. And absolutely, the Recreation Commission should vote on anything that comes before us. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Hickey?
I agree with both Matt and Kenny. And obviously, everyone's health is the most important thing. But, you know, as Billy spoke about it earlier, the financial end of it, he actually used the word not to make a pun of it, but take a bath. So I'd like to see that also as part of the plan is, you know, and everyone's health is absolutely the most important thing. But if we're going to lose $10,000 or $15,000 by opening the Cove, I'm not sure it's worth taking any kind of chance at all.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is if they come up with a plan that they're going to present to us, you'd like to know the financial impact as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, great. Mr. Bloss.
The financial impact is crucial to this. I'm laughing as the only person here who's ever been a lifeguard at Cranberry Cove in another life. And in all this time, Cranberry Cove has not changed its layout, its position. The fences have barely moved. The H&I docks have never moved. So when John Zuko said he's worried about things like what's going on in the parking lot, it's like, this is a big staff we're dealing with. And in the best of circumstances, when we haven't had to worry about social distancing, there are times when that parking lot is a public menace and requires policing. And no, there's no money to have policing this on a regular basis. And I can only envision, I so sympathize, I feel so badly, but I can only envision that within 2 weeks of the Cove opening, it's going to be closed again because of the issues at the gate with kid gatekeepers and kid lifeguards. I mean, I'm assuming I know a couple of the lifeguards will be on, and we're talking young college-age kids who are going to be dealing with belligerent families who want their people on the beach now, and they're not interested in waiting. I mean, I read the whole, Diane did a pretty good job. I thought I had read all the information for tonight. I mean, with the hour and 45 minutes, that's what they're paying for.
Does he know he went?
Mr. Bloss, I think you're working up to a crescendo, but you muted out.
Sorry, it's just, I would say that the Rec Commission, if in the end they agree to open it and we say yes, I think they have to be ready, and their staff, the lifeguarding staff, has to be ready that their employment could end 5 days after they begin. It's that volatile situation.
Okay, but so you agree that we're not in a place tonight that we're going to take any kind of a vote on it because we just don't have a plan to respond to.
I agree.
Okay, and Mr. Sullivan, did you want to chime in?
Thank you very much. My input is the same from a financial standpoint. With it not taking in the revenue this year, it's going to require a larger subsidy from the town next year. My advice would be to keep the Cove and all the facilities closed for the remainder of the season.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sullivan. So
actually, Mrs. Chairman, can I ask Kate a question on this? I mean, all these years, I've understood, because John was right. They're going to, for 50 years, for 60 years, people use the Cove as soon as the gates are closed and the staff is gone. Everyone's into the Cove. I mean, people swim there all into the night. And I bet people will be swimming all into the morning because it doesn't open until 12. So, but that's always been the case. I was under the impression that the town was not liable for people on the beach if the town had posted, the beach is closed, there is no swimming, there is no staff, no one can come in. Then when they break in, which you can, Kate, people can get around. But when you break in, the town has no liability for injuries because we made it clear that the Cove is closed.
Yeah, so this is actually a super tricky area of the law with a lot of competing case law. So it's different for example, what you're talking about is trespassers, right? There's no liability for a trespasser if you're breaking into someone's house and you crash through the roof.
Correct.
Not my fault. So same thing with the beach areas. You post the no trespassing signs, and that's what you do. But they also measure it on what kinds of warnings you give. Just like when you're using your chainsaw, don't put it against your head. You know, there's that warning. And you do the same thing with your beach. You no trespassing, no lifeguard on duty. Police will take notice, that kind of stuff. And for children, it's sometimes a little bit different because it's called what for children is called an attractive nuisance, is something that looks so good, like a candy store, and a beach area is attractive to children. The liability risk is greater. But again, you can only take measures that are reasonable. That's the negligence standard. Did I take reasonable measures to mitigate the risk? And in those circumstances, posting, putting up a gate, you know, all of that stuff is pretty reasonable in my estimation.
Okay. Any further questions on that? Okay, seeing none, I will say thank you to the Recreation Commission and to the Recreation Director. I think you guys have got a lot of work to do, a lot of things to take under consideration, and we look forward to hearing back from you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, boy, let's see, we're just clipping along. Whitman Hanson Regional School District graduation request discussion. I don't know that there's much more for us to discuss on that because what I do know is that they have, the district has put out officially that graduation is happening the 31st, even though we didn't approve of it to happen. We sort of said, like, let's see how things are going and what the regulations are. It does put us in an extremely awkward position, but I'm hopeful that that they'll be in a place where the Board of Health and the Board of Selectmen are able to officially approve it, I guess probably at our next meeting on the 23rd. So I don't know that there's much more to talk about that unless anybody here had more that they wanted to say. All right.
Laura, can I just say, I mean, I read,
yes.
I forget his name even, Whitman Hanson Principals. Is that a new email from him?
Sorry.
This was not from Chris Jones, it was from the principal.
Right, no, Chris Jones is the principal.
Chris Jones is the principal, right? Okay.
Yeah, yep.
I mean, but
yep.
that's not another email. That's the email.
No. That's the email, and then he sent out an announcement, and it's like on the website. It's everywhere. I mean, basically, that's the date everybody's marching to is the 31st. So,
I mean, as you said, we're in an awkward position.
Yep.
But I, for one, do not want to deny the 2020 graduates a chance. I would move that we allow them to move forward with this as long as they're complying with the state, the governor's regulations, and with the Board of Health regulations, whatever they may be, when the time
okay,
comes.
so just get it out there preemptively and just, okay. Then I will entertain a motion.
Is that Greer? Is that okay as a motion whenever I gibbered?
I'll second that motion.
Your second was clearer, Kenny, than my motion.
I was going to make the motion, so thank you, Mr. Bloss, for beating me to it.
All right.
Okay, so we've got a motion, and do we have a second?
I seconded it, Laura.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm having severe technical difficulties, mostly self-imposed. I will move to the motion then. Mr. Dyer.
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell.
Aye.
Mr. Hickey.
Aye.
Mr. Bloss.
Aye.
And Ms. Kemet, aye. Okay, great. Thank you. So now moving on to town meeting logistics. Do we have Shawn Keeley with us, or, okay, do you have any updates for us, Shawn, or should we just move past this?
I'm just checking with Beth. Beth's still here with us. I wanted to see
Oh,
if she,
okay.
anything that you wanted to say about that one. Right. So I spoke with the town moderator, Shawn Keeley, and we went over some things about, I think we had talked about this in other meetings, previous meetings, about, what we could do in order to, obviously to take care of keep the social distancing rules in place, given the size of the crowd that might turn out to town meeting. And he was, again, he talked about the high school gym as a place, the auditorium, even outside, maybe with a tent or something, or Indian Head, or again, the middle school. And I think he ended up coming up with you have it right here, I'm sorry. We do have the capacity of each one of those if you wanted to talk about it, but it looks like the high school seating is 850 fixed seats. The lecture hall is 120 fixed seats. The gym is 13,600 square feet, but that holds about 1,700 chairs for graduation. So I'm not sure what the capacity would be there. The middle school auditorium is 426 fixed seats, and the gym is about 6,900 square feet, and they can put in 250 kids in there without any problem. So, I mean, I guess it would come down to what the crowd might, again, I'm using the word crowd, what the audience or the residents groups size would be, and how we could maintain social distancing. And those were the things we went back and forth. He didn't have any recommendation on it, but he just wanted to make sure that I got across it, that we did talk about those things and maybe start to discuss.
Okay, so I think that's interesting. I happen to be, and I think I shared this with Shawn, and I think with Beth, and perhaps with you. I was on a MMA call last week where they were getting into some details about this, and they were talking about this with some towns that had already had their town meetings. And one of the things that they really strongly urged is, to the extent you can have this outside, you ought to have it outside. Just because it helps with people's comfort level about it not spreading, with the social distancing, and and we know that typically things that are held outside tend to have less of a rate, in terms of infection rate. They also talked about having seaters and greeters, so people greeting and seating people, making sure that it's ADA compliant, whatever we do, that there's accessibility for people, making sure that we think about what we would do for folks that show up and do not want to wear a mask, and that type of thing. Also thinking about handling of the mic and what that means in terms of infectious control. So those were some of the things, and I think that was in the PowerPoint, but it's also out on the MMA website. There's a recording of it. It was quite excellent. It was Lauren Goldberg, I think, Kate. She's from KP, I think. And she had presented, and she did a pretty comprehensive job, and then they had different people from different towns. So I'm sure Shawn and Beth and you will, work out the details, John, but, there's a lot to work out. If it's outside, of course, then you've got to think about, do you need a canopy, and how do you get the seating and all that type of stuff. So, so maybe can we plan on having that discussed at our 23rd meeting too? I just want to make sure that people, I mean, it looks like we're having it at the high school one way or another, right? Hey, Beth.
Hey, as far as Shawn, we really would like to have it outside. I think he was really going towards Indian Head. The only thing I was thinking about there is parking. I don't know how good, if we have at least 1,000 people, with the question that we're dealing with, I'm not sure how that would work. The high school would probably be the best, but then have to think about the tent. And ADA probably would be the best at the high school as well, because Indian Head, in Kewanee, there's nothing there. So if you're going to do it outside, I definitely think you do the high school.
Okay.
Can I say something? if you're gonna have graduation at the high school where Ernie has to set up the chairs and possibly tents already, because they're gonna do it outside, would it make sense to have it the day before or around the same time so that it's all set up, or there's some help there in setting it up?
Well, they've already announced that their graduation is happening on June 31st, I believe, and our town meeting is set for 7/20. So we've got a 3-week gap there.
Is it June 31st or is it, no, it's July, I thought.
Oh, you might be right. No, I thought it was, I don't know, I'll have to look at it.
Mhm.
I thought it was
Just an
June
idea.
31st, but you might be right. Yeah, no, no, good point. What are you saying, Ken? It is July?
Yes, it is July
Yeah.
31st.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea, Deb. We can reach out and maybe we could have some skills of economy there. If we have to pay for tents, maybe we can see if, they might be buying it anyway, or, they might have something we can use. Good idea. Okay, Beth. So I think the main thing is obviously just telling people where it's going to be, because I think that they did mention that say we decide to have it at the high school, you don't have to actually say whether it's going to be in the field or whether it's going to be inside or whatever. You just need to say at the high school. Mr. Bloss.
Okay, well, actually, that explains that, Laura, then I think. I'm just thinking there is no chance of a tent large enough or 10 tents large enough to handle this outside. And which means if it was a sunny day, but what happens if that day is pouring rain? Then how do we postpone town meeting in pouring rain?
Yeah, so
But
they did say
if
that's,
as you said, if it's indoors, okay.
Yeah, they said you can really pivot, but you
Okay.
just have to tell them the physical location. So you don't have to say the gym or the pack or the field. You just have to say at the high school, and then there has to be clear signage telling people where at the high school. So, all right, awesome. Kate, did you have something you want? Yeah.
Yeah, and this doesn't have to do with the location because you guys are better suited to figure that out. But the other thing, and it may be more appropriate to discuss when we're talking about the warrant itself, but the other thing is, let's try to get this thing done quick, right? And Hanson already has a really super quick town meeting. It's wonderful, so helpful. But one way to streamline it is through a consent agenda. So all of your items that don't ever get discussion, so CPA reserves, like the town reports, all the other kind of smaller issues that really aren't controversial, you can put on a consent agenda, and Shawn could read it like he does with the budget. Say, I'm thinking about putting all of these on a consent agenda and list the articles. And if there's an article that you want to discuss, put a hold on it, just like the budget. And then he'll put the holds to the other side, and then he can pass all those articles, 10, you could probably knock out 10 or 20 articles in one motion through that process. He approves those, and the ones that he held or were called to be held can just be treated like a regular article with its own independent motion. It's a way to really make the process a lot quicker. And people do that even before the pandemic. So it's a possibility to consider.
Okay, so that's a lot to unpack there, and I just want to go around and see if anybody's got any questions. Mr. Dyer, thoughts, questions, comments?
I like the consent agenda. It works really well, especially where people have that opportunity to still put that hold. But what I was going to say is if we do it outside, and especially at night, one thing that we need to consider, and just one more logistical thing, is just making sure we get the mosquito control down there to spray ahead of time. And then the other part of it too is seating. I know with those metal chairs, those metal rental chairs, they're really hard for some folks to sit in, and they may not be comfortable to be sitting in those for prolonged times. So that's just another thing to consider. One thing that we may want to look into is, I know one or two communities may have done a drive-in style town meeting where they all parked in in a huge parking lot, which we could use maybe Shaw's if they were so gracious to let us do it. And they had a drive-in style town meeting. People were comfortable in their cars. they could all hear it because they could tune their radio to whatever channel it may be. Everyone was social distancing. It was a real unique idea. I don't know, I mean, whether or not it would work in Hanson, I don't know. Maybe John could reach out to the community that had done it and just kind of see if that had worked, and bring back any feedback.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Mr. Mitchell?
Yeah, I like Kate's idea of the streamlined agenda. You know, especially where we're going to be out of our element no matter what we do, whether it's inside or outside. So we're going to run into hiccups. So I think having the streamlined agenda will definitely help speed things up. So great idea, Kate.
And Kate, just to clarify, is that our choice, or does Shawn as the moderator need to make the choice to do that?
Well, I don't know. It's better if you all agree. It's your warrant, but it's his meeting. He really controls the meeting. But I think Shawn would probably want your buy-in as well.
Okay, I just want to make sure, you know, that if we're all bullish about it and for some reason Shawn doesn't want to do it, I don't want there to become an impasse. I can't imagine he'd have a problem with it, but, and Mr. Hickey.
No, Kate, great idea, and Laura, great question to ask that. I don't think Shawn would have a problem either, where if, you know, the 7 or 8 of us sit down and figure out what could go on this, then it could be a streamlined meeting. I think, and Kenny had mentioned, with all the hiccups that we are going to have, it may be best to have it inside in the biggest auditorium or hall or seating area that we could get in case it does rain or the mosquitoes are bad.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, anything you choose is going to have pitfalls. It's like, you know, I mean, yep. Mr. Bloss.
But I'm also thinking that Whitman is doing the dry run for us the week before. So by that,
yeah.
So if there are hiccups, by that point, hopefully everyone will know what the hiccups are. It seems to me that saying, well, you both the auditorium and the gym, starting there, and like we used to do at Hanson Middle with an overflow crowd, there was, you know, the gym was televised. At least go in with that in mind.
Now, Whitman is in a weird position right now because technically, I think their bylaws don't allow them to have a town meeting outside of their town. And so if they want to have it at the high school right now, then my understanding, and speaking to some of them yesterday, was that they're still waiting for something to pass at the state level, allowing them to do that, to have town meeting outside of town confines. But their meeting is actually, okay, I'm moving on, and I'm just rising above this. And so I think, their meeting is supposed to be, actually, I want to say their town meeting is coming up like the 22nd of June. So they're quite a bit before us, but you're right. If they are able to have it there, if, you know, if all of the stars and moons align, and they're able to have it, then we can hopefully benefit from some of what they've gone through. So, okay. So Kate, do we need to take a vote on that, or where are we on that?
No, if it's something you want to approve, the warrant itself doesn't change, so it's all laid out the same way. It's just how it's presented when Shawn presents it. So if you guys just give a sense that I get a sense from you, we've got some buy-in. John and I can even talk with Shawn about how to coordinate, and then we could have a meeting to discuss jointly which articles we think would be appropriate and just tick them off. No vote tonight.
All right, and Beth, since we have you here, and I'm sorry, we kind of like got waylaid a bit off of that subject, but then we got, you know, wildly caught up in the moment of the consent concept. Is there anything else that you wanted to have us think about, or anything you wanted to communicate to people, or?
No, just that Ernie Sandland put this together for us. He gave us all the information that we needed. And if we do have it at the high school inside, if we were in the auditorium and the little, what do they call it? It's a little small lecture hall, and the gym, that is all set up already for all of it to be wired, and the videos all together. So they really don't have to do anything, just flip a switch and it's all set.
Okay, so that seems kind of turnkey versus trying to create something outside. Okay, yeah. Okay, that's awesome, and thank you. I know you've been doing all kinds of crazy stuff with absentee ballots and early ballots. Did you
We
want to
got
talk?
the absentee and early ballots yesterday and today. Everyone that has requested one went out in the mail today. So we've
Okay,
got
and
200 ballots already.
so if people don't feel comfortable physically going to the polls on June 27th, I'm going to cue it up to you, Beth. What should they
We
do?
really would like them to absentee or early vote by mail. That would be wonderful.
And if I don't know how to do that, what do I do? I'm interested, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Well, it is on the website, but if you don't, well, obviously, if you're not interested, you can always call us. You can write a letter, and what you need is your name, your legal voting address, that you want a ballot for this election coming up for the town election, and most important is your signature. So just send that. As soon as we get it, we mail the ballot out. I don't know when town hall will be open for them to bring back the ballot. They can mail the ballot. They can, we're going to try to set it up so they can knock on the door and we just, hand with mask, take the ballots in, because we actually have to have the person sign the ballot, whoever's delivered the ballot.
Okay, so you are not encouraging people to put it in the Dropbox?
They can, but it's really tiny. It's really not made for that. So when we're here, we would like to have you give it to us. We'll gladly meet you and do it. The other thing I want to tell you is next Wednesday, the 17th, we have a voter registration that we have to have by law. And because of the special legislature, they said the voter registration is from 2 to 4 and 7 to 8. So those 3 hours, the town hall will be open, but just the front door unless you need the handicap. And it's just for voter registration because we're not open yet.
Yep. Okay. All right. So you're juggling a lot of balls there. And now if I get an absentee or early ballot and I don't want to mail it in, or I procrastinate, say theoretically you procrastinate, and I don't really get my act together to get it in the mail in time to get it to you, can I email it to you? Can I scan it and email it to you?
No, that is not allowed.
Okay.
I have to have the physical ballot.
Okay. So you need to have the physical ballot. Okay. Okay.
And hopefully we'll be open that we can take the ballots. If not, I'd be gladly to meet anyone and grab the ballot from them.
And what is the deadline for people to get the ballot to you?
To the day of the election.
Okay.
They can,
So by 5 p.m., right?
But that's kind of, doing the point of doing it by mail. But
Yep. Okay. All right. Thank you, Beth. And thanks for all the hard work that you're doing. I know you guys are running around like maniacs. So thank you. We appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Take care. So that brings us to 2020 annual and special town meeting warrants. Kate, what did you have to say about that?
There's a lot to say. So I worked with John and we edited the warrant up in most recently today. What I did for the annual, there weren't any edits on the special town meeting warrant. I don't think from the one that he sent you earlier, but I did edit the annual town meeting warrant to eliminate the reference to the election and the article to the election, because remember, this is a weird year and we're not having the election coming after the town meeting. So, and that's all perfectly permissible.
Yeah, can we pump the brakes just right there for a minute? Because I am hearing a lot of chatter about, how can they have the election before the town meeting? I thought the town meeting had to happen legally before the election. And of course, we know that this is just a weird set of circumstances that led us to this place where we thought out of an abundance of caution, we were having our election the last permissible Saturday so that we didn't have any problem with anything passing and us having to go into a 1/12 budget by not having a budget in place July 1st. And then as we started to look at having town meeting, we just felt entirely uncomfortable with exposing people unnecessarily and, you know, all that. So we moved our town meeting to be after our town election. And can you speak to the fact that we've got the override article on our ballot, and then on the town meeting, we of course are talking about the budget. And so how do those things interact, and what are the pitfalls for the unwary? For instance, you know, is it permissible for us to do that, to have the override article before town meeting on the ballot? And why is it permissible? Are there contingencies? What happens if the ballot passes at the town election, and then we get to town meeting? Are we required to spend that 800,000?
Yeah, so great questions, and I know it's really complicated. And the reason why people are generally confused is because in normal circumstances, for most towns, they have their town meeting first and then their election. But that's not true even in regular circumstances. So I have one town where they have the election the week before, and the new selectmen, you can sympathize with these guys, have to go to their first town meeting a week later as a selectman. So it's crazy. But no, for the purposes of the override, first off, the legislation allows us to postpone both the election and the town meeting. So just the postponement in general, in terms of operations, is perfectly permissible. As it relates to the override, it is 100% clear. And for anyone who's looking, look on the Division of Local Services website for Proposition 2.5. They have guidance on there. It will tell you, they have a spreadsheet on the examples. Election fails, town meeting appropriation fails, what's the result? All that stuff. It specifically says in that guidance, and it's part of the law, that it doesn't matter, the order of the election versus the town meeting doesn't matter. And I'll give you a real world example of how crazy these overrides can get. Typically, you have an override for, let's say, building a new school, right? And typically that you get your school crowd who comes out to the town meeting and they approve that debt exclusion. And then if it's going to fail, it tends to fail at the election. I had a town where it actually failed at town meeting, and then a week later when the election happened, the debt exclusion question passed. And so then they went back and they had another town meeting. So they had two town meetings on the single question. So the variables are so, there are many variables, and there are many computations to getting to the answer. If the town wants to pass the budget that Whitman Hanson School Committee has given, the assessment that's given, and if they don't want to cut services, all three things have to happen. The regional school amendment has to be approved at the town meeting on, I think it's like Article 4 or 5, something like that on the warrant. That has to pass because that allows the town to have a different method of calculating, apportioning the total school budget among the two, between the two towns. Also, the budget has to pass, the omnibus budget with the general, you know, whatever the full school budget is, $20 million or whatever it is, and the $800,000 additional appropriation, which is contingent upon the override question passing at the ballot at the election. And then the ballot question also has to pass. So if you don't want any cut in services, you want to approve that assessment as presented by the school committee, all of those things have to happen. Okay.
And so if the override question fails, now walk me through. We get to town meeting and we have the amendment, we have the budget, and what are our options? Can we have a different assessment method than what is in the amendment?
Yeah, so the good news about having our town meeting later is we actually are going to know what all our cards are at that point, because we're going to know what happened at the election. We're going to know what happened at Whitman town meeting. So we're going to know what they did too. So if the override fails, all that means is, say you have, and I'm making up the number, say you have a $60 million levy limit. So you cannot raise taxes. Then raising taxes means I'm telling you, homeowner, this is what you're going to have to pay. You are capped out per Massachusetts state law by raising that amount from last year's levy limit by 2.5%. If the override fails, it just means you can't go past that cap. You can't raise any more than what you're capped at. You haven't adjusted that. So you've got no more, and I think about it in a wallet, your wallet is not expandable. You can't go past that $60 million or whatever it is. Okay, so if that fails, you have a couple of options, right? You have the assessment, which is presented to the school, and this is not an end all be all. They say you owe me, I don't know, $11 million or something for total. And you have the option. So what your obligation is under the law in a regional agreement is you have to present to town meeting what has been presented by the school committee, but it means presented. Your motion doesn't have to be, I move that $11 million be paid to the school. It can be a lesser amount, right? And if the town approves a lesser amount, the appropriation is actually taking the money out of your wallet and giving it to the school. So if you appropriate a lesser amount, all you've done is given them that lesser amount. And the school committee then has a decision to make. They say, all right, you know what? We have some cushion in our budget, or we can live with some cuts. We're going to live with that amount, or we're going to say, Hanson, you've got another shot at the apple. We're going to give you a lesser assessment, a greater assessment. They can come back and give a greater assessment, or they can accept what you gave them. Okay. So the appropriation piece is actually giving the money away. So if the override fails or passes, it doesn't matter. Town meeting is still the one who gives the money to the school committee.
Okay. I mean, I just wanted to, I wanted to connect those two pieces because again, because of the timing, people are getting very confused about how that works. Now, that kind of handles the budget. So we can certainly say if it doesn't pass, we want to give less, we want to reduce what we're giving to the district. That's an option. Are we able to say we want to reduce what we're giving to the district if the override does pass, considering that okay.
Yeah, the override just allows for it to happen. So it allows the possibility to exist, whereas the town meeting determines if that possibility becomes a reality. They are the ones who take out the money.
All right, and if the amendment does not pass?
So the amendment is trickier, right? We need the amendment because the way the assessment works is the school committee has two choices when they're making the assessment. They have the statutory method and the alternative method. And the alternative method, all that means is what is written in the regional agreement. And the regional agreement isn't a regional agreement until it's approved by both town meetings. So both Whitman and Hanson have to do it. So if the regional agreement, which we have on before the budget articles, if that doesn't pass, the apportionment can't be under this compromise. So then it actually puts the school committee in kind of a weird position. So also if Whitman doesn't pass it, it puts the school committee in an awkward position because now they don't have the apportionment based on what we have in our agreement or the statutory method, and they're going to definitely have to rejigger things on their end. Mm-hmm. So that's a trickier issue that we have to worry about on the school side, and we just appropriate what we're going to appropriate. We're going to give them what we're going to give them, and then follow that process.
And is there any concern about the fact that the amendment has got a contingency in it, that it, I think we've talked about this before.
Oh, you mean the override, the article on the additional $800,000?
Yep.
No, so you can have a contingent override, and all that means is and it's actually, so it's kind of silly because we're going to know if the override passed, but we need it in the warrant article just in case it didn't pass, because we have posting requirements and all that jazz. But what the contingency only does is they say, I'm going to give you this money, I'm going to take it out of my wallet, but only if the voters approve that additional capacity. Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to give you that money and then realize, oh no, I don't have the override, and now as a consequence I have to find Kevin, poor guy,
Yep.
has to find $800,000 in the existing budget within the levy limit, which would be, I want to say, a pretty catastrophic cut in services.
Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Kate, with regard to, we go to town meeting, the town appropriates a certain amount back to the school committee. The school committee reviews it and says, no, we're going the full amount we told you we were going to go. Where do we go from there? Are we bound to go back, and do we have to have another town meeting, or is this something we sit down and as an administrative function go back? I mean, we only get one bite of the apple here at the town meeting to say, here's what we're appropriating. And if the school committee is steadfast in their opposition, and Whitman's given the amount that they've been told, and what happens if the school committee says, no, you're going to pay the amount we told you to pay?
Yeah, so if you go back with a lesser amount, the school committee reconvenes and decides what to do. And if they're saying, no, we're demanding the full additional $800,000 or $865, whatever it is, then you have another town meeting. And at that point, you reject again. So it's actually really cumbersome. You reject again, and then they go back and look at it, and then they decide whether or not they have a district-wide meeting, meaning Hanson and Whitman come together and have a big mega town meeting. And then if that fails at that point, then we go into the whole, am I going to get to December 1st and the state takes over? And if the state takes over, the state decides what the budget should be. It's not the school. I mean, they get input. I'm not going to say it's not interactive, but they get input from both towns and the school, and decide what the needs of the school are. And then it's 100% certain they apportion whatever they determine is in the best interest of the children on the statutory method.
Okay. All set on that, Mr. Sullivan?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure we have the mechanism. I'm getting a lot of questions about what happens as we, I hate to say it, I had to wade into the Facebook discussion to put out some information, to get this override hopefully approved. And, there's a lot of staunch oppositionists that are, I'll say, ready to burn it down and just let it run to December. And that's my greatest fear, is that the state in the end, which created the statutory method, through all this fighting, is going to still step in December and say, no, we agree with the school committee, you need to pay your full statutory method. So I just wanted to make sure I have the process down correctly. And, I think it'll be important that, we can put this video out on the different websites so that the townspeople can see this is the process. This is what's going to happen. I don't think some people understand how real this is and the severity of where we're headed if we can't figure this out. Thank you.
And I did applaud you for your bravery and wading through those social media waters. That was very courageous of you. And so, okay, and I think one thing that I did want to mention, although I don't think that this board is inclined to bring it up, Kate, is I believe that recently there was a change. There was a change that allows boards of selectmen to change the quorum needed at a town meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, yay in a way, but given the situations that we have, I don't think that at least I can only speak for myself, I don't think we would be inclined to unilaterally change the quorum size given the contentious issues that we have before us. I'm just gonna, if you don't mind, Kate, just kind of quickly go around to the guys, see if they've got any questions before we move on to our next topic. Mr. Dyer.
Ms. Chair, is this just general questions or in regards to the quorum?
Either. I mean, really, yeah, anything.
I have a quick question in regards to, do we have anything as like a forum where people can call in with their questions, like a little radio chat show? Because I know that's a lot of feedback I've been getting is
yes,
the public's left out in the dark, and we need to get this.
That's already in the works, Mr. Dyer. Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Stanbrook, I believe, are filming something on Thursday that will be informational. They're working with Kevin Tachi to put something out there. It will be factual.
Okay, great. No, I just wanted to make sure that that could get out there.
Mr. Sullivan, did you want to, I'm sorry, Mr. Dyer, can I just allow Mr. Sullivan to respond?
Yes, so thank you very much. We've had discussion with Kevin Tachi from Whitman Hanson Cable Access. We're going to try and get in the studio and film an informational piece on the budget and the override this week, so we can get it out as soon as possible. I think Mr. Stanbrook and I also discussed maybe doing a radio show that would allow for actual call-ins, again with Mr. Tachi, where we would sort of be in the studio and be available to answer the questions.
That's great.
Okay.
I like that. There's a component.
Mr. Dyer. Yep.
So, and then my last two quick questions. Just the other day, new regulations or recommendations on how the schools are going to be operating this fall, where it's only 10 students per classroom. Is there any way that we can get the superintendent to come to our meeting to discuss these changes? Because I think this is really going to change these budget numbers once again with these limited class sizes. I don't know how it's all going to work. I know that the governor is going to further release these details maybe next week, but maybe that's something that we should really look at and make sure that these are the numbers that we do need before moving on.
I think we can, John and Greer, could you take that as to check with Mr. Simonek to see if there's sufficient detail around this at this point for us to have a meaningful conversation and for him to be able to size the impact on his budget? And if so, could we add him to our 23rd agenda? All right, fabulous, thanks. Continue, Mr. Dyer.
My last thought, I promise. I don't think that we should change the quorum. I think we need to leave it where it is.
Agreed. Mr. Mitchell.
No questions at this time.
Okay, great. Mr. Hickey.
I'm all set, thank you.
Awesome. Mr. Bloss.
I'm just going to bet we'll have no trouble getting a quorum.
I think you may be right about that. Despite COVID, people are alive and kicking in Hanson, and they will show up at town meeting. Okay, so Ms. Theodoff, what else did you want to tell us about the 2020 annual and special town meeting warrants? Anything else that we need to think about?
No, I mean, just the only point of discussion really is going to be this budget issue. And, you know, I think the ideas that are flowing around to make it a streamlined process are good ones. And I'll be there at town meeting and hopefully we'll answer anyone's questions who have them. You know, I'm happy to help in any way.
Okay. So are we at a point where you need us to be voting on anything, Mr. Stanbrook, this evening?
No, I'm going to set that up for the 23rd, and then if something happens on the 23rd, we have one more bite at it on the 30th. So we have two chances, but 23rd, that would be where the voting would start.
Okay, fabulous.
I did forget one thing, Laura. Oh my goodness. If we do pursue the consent agenda, we want to make sure that the warrant is as detailed as the motions would be. So, for example, if we're doing like we think a $5,000 appropriation isn't going to engender any discussion, we want to include that rather than a sum of money, because you just move it as printed in the warrant. So along those lines, when I work with John and Shawn, we'll make sure that those numbers are in there. So our warrant's going to be a lot more detailed than normal.
But the thought process is you're giving people everything they need in the interest of expediting, but not giving them short shrift with the information that they need and otherwise would be presented at town meeting.
That's exactly right. They'll have a longer opportunity than normal because we'll be super organized.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, town information outreach, I think we kind of already covered that. I did want to address something which I've got down here as Whitman Hanson Regional District letter regarding FY21 budget, but just prior to that, I wanted to mention in last week's Whitman Hanson Express, there was a 2-page insert from the Whitman Finance Committee. And the week prior to that, there was an open letter to the taxpayers of Whitman and Hanson. And in last week's Express, what was concerning and what was found after the fact is that that was a paid advertisement in the Whitman Hanson Express. It did not say that, but in speaking directly with the Deb at the Express, we've found that it was an ad that was paid for by 2 people who are members of the Whitman FinCom. And why am I bringing this up? And I'm bringing it up because there were some inaccuracies in it. And in addition to that, it seemed as though it was written in a manner which was to tell Whitman voters to vote against the amendment and to tell Hanson voters to kind of get with the program and this is what's happening and just get used to it. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But I think it was rather vitriolic, a bit combative. But what is most concerning to me is that, as I'm sure all of you are aware, we have campaign finance regulations that we all must comply with, and they simply do not allow for people to put in to a paper with the express purpose of trying to urge people to vote one way or the other and pay for it without being a political action committee. And that they are not a legitimate political action committee. And I believe that they've stepped over the line on this. I've discussed this with Kate. I also did call the chair of the Whitman Board of Selectmen yesterday and mentioned my dismay and concern at not only the action, but the fact that there were a number of inaccuracies in the piece. And I'm not going to get into each and every inaccuracy, but I do want to say that one of the basic premises of that letter was that Chapter 70 money can be broken out by town and that DESI would be able to give them those numbers. And as you guys know, we've been partnering with Josh Cutler. He's been very supportive of our efforts to try to move the needle on this, as difficult as this is to do. And given the current legislative state and the position that DESI has taken. And Josh was in contact with Rob O'Donnell at DESI, and his exact words were, when he was shown that article, his response to Mr. Cutler was, we quote, "We don't apportion aid between regional members in the Chapter 70 formula, so I am not sure how they came up with these numbers. This is not our analysis," end quote. And I mention this because I think we're at a point, guys, where I really feel as though I don't want to be getting into, a tit for tat type of a discussion, but I just don't see how, given the fact that they keep saying that, the Chapter 70 money is based on individual towns and not the district as a whole, and that, they kind of keep like repeating this over and over again. And then they give this chart that lays out this history of alleged Chapter 70 funds from the state that's broken out not by the district but by the town. But if we know that DESI never gave them these numbers, then this is all extremely misleading information. And then, it gets into all kinds of stuff about, disparities between the towns and how we're wealthier and we've been taking advantage of Whitman and, et cetera, et cetera. We've heard all of that before. The reason I'm bringing this up is I really feel that we need to respond. And I am not suggesting that we're going to respond in a 2-page letter because, I just don't think that's the appropriate response. But at a bare minimum, I would like to suggest to you guys that we need to respond and say, look, this is unfair that we've got a political action committee coming against us and not a level playing field. And they are not giving accurate facts. And here's the accurate facts. And I really don't see us doing much more than that, like very basic response. But I do want to put people on notice, particularly the citizens of Hanson, that these are not accurate facts and that, these are people, though in their mind they may be well-intentioned, have stepped over the line. And as I said, I've got a real concern about it. That these are people that have been appointed to FinCom, and I appreciate that they are dedicated and passionate about what they're doing, but they've really tainted the pot here, and unfairly so. So I open it up. I hope you guys had an opportunity to read the piece that I'm talking about, but if you didn't, then none of what I just said will make sense. But if you did, I would like to hear your thoughts. Mr. Dyer.
I agree with you, Laura, that we need to make sure that the accurate information gets out there, and whether we post it on our town website or wherever it may be, I think that's a step in the right direction in making sure that the accurate information gets out there. Maybe too, I know this is a big ask, is maybe Whitman can share that on their town website as well, but I think that might be beyond our jurisdiction. But I think asking for a correction, especially as it's town officials putting that information out there, I think we need to make that ask regardless.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dyer. Mr. Mitchell.
How would you want to respond? Like, what do you think, Laura, as far as responding to it? Because obviously we can't put something in the paper. So what were your thoughts?
No, we actually can. When I called the paper, they said, well, we would allow you an opportunity to rebut. And I said, well, I have no intention of writing a 2-page rebuttal. That is just beyond, even for me. So she said they would offer us a letter to the editor or some other format, a guest column, whatever. I think letter to the editor requires us to do 400 words or less, which I think we can do because, as I said, I don't intend to get into the weeds other than to say, this is inaccurate. Here's what Desi says. Here are the facts. And this was a political action committee that did not disclose that this was A, an advertisement, and B, that they were a political action committee.
Yeah, so I'd be fine with that, as long as we're going to get right to the facts. If it's a letter to the editor, I'd be fine with that.
Okay, thanks, Ken. Mr. Hickey.
Okay.
Boy.
My turn.
Oh, God.
I would actually want the Express to reprint that 2-page ad and over it in big letters say untrue or not the truth. I know that's not going to happen. But with what Matt said, we're into this meeting now for 2.5 hours. I don't know how many people are still listening. Or maybe when it's recorded, they can fast forward to this because this is one of the most important things we're going to talk about tonight, Laura. And thank you for digging this up. I did read it and I was amazed because I was trying to comprehend the figures and they just didn't make sense. And I didn't know how they got to these numbers. Now, my question would be to Kate, and I know we're not gonna do this either, but there should be some type of legal action. These are public officials in Whitman appointed by their Board of Selectmen.
Well, by their moderator.
Okay, yeah. Well, then
yeah.
They first of all, they should be dismissed or asked to resign because the intent was to fool the public, which, when you were talking about this, I was beside myself. Obviously, I don't know how the camera works and people saw me on camera having a cigarette. I apologize for that. Because we're not in our regular meeting atmosphere sitting behind that table. But if we were tonight, while you were telling me this sitting next to me, I'd be going berserk. And I'd want
Yeah,
that
I can
big
picture that.
magic marker saying this, they can't get away with it. And by putting a little thing on the website, no one's going to read it. You know, by a small letter to the editor, you know, maybe more people will see it. But something has to be done. I mean, this is just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous by officials from the town of Whitman. And it just
Okay.
kind of shows you what we're dealing with and have been
I mean,
dealing
I
with
did like your
since
first, I did
last
like your
August.
first, I liked your first suggestion. It's probably not going to happen, but I did kind of like it. I liked the image of it. But I doubt we're going to be able to get them to print that again and then put false on it. But it was a good concept. So, okay, I mean, I know it's a lot to take in. Mr. Bloss, thoughts?
No, I think you're right. Jim, what would Machiavelli say about this? Okay, Jim's gone. No, Laura, I assume you're going to write.
Oh, no. Oh, no, I'm here, Wes, but Machiavelli wouldn't say anything. He wouldn't. You know
You're
that.
right.
You know
He
exactly what he
do
would do.
something. He would do something, and probably what you said would be great, but I don't know how to take a picture of that 2-page spread with you magic marking across it and then making Tracy print it. At any rate, Laura, are you going to write this letter, I'm assuming?
I thought I'd take a first pass, and then I'm trying to figure out, because I think timeliness is important. So John or Kate, I don't know what, like, I obviously want the guys to feel comfortable with what's written, but I don't want to have to wait till the 23rd to you know, print it. So how can John get approval for a letter without us having to meet again? Is he able to just say, like, can we do a negative consent, like it's going to go unless somebody has wild objections, in which case we'll talk about it at the 23rd meeting?
So that's really still an open meeting law issue, unfortunately, because a negative opinion means if everyone's saying, fine, you're deliberating, you're saying, I approve. If people are saying no, they're saying, I don't approve. So it's really a deliberation. If you want to get it out before the 23rd, you have to just designate someone to do it and then trust that they're
okay. I mean, are you guys comfortable with what I just outlined that I'm going to say? Which
Laura,
is
you have my vote.
okay. All right. Mr.
I'm
Hickey, are you
good.
okay with it? Okay. Mr.
I'm
Mitchell?
good, but I do have magic markers if you need them.
Duly noted. I'll take that under advisement.
Just make sure that I get a copy of it when it's completed, please.
Oh yeah, I'll send it to all of you before it, you know, as I'm sending it to the Express, not for your permission, but just as an FYI. And okay, great. So let's see, where are we? I really got off track here. Oh, Whitman Hanson Regional School District letter regarding FY21 budget discussion. Mr. Stanbrook. Did I lose? Oh, okay. I thought my headpiece was going. I'm like, oh God. Okay. Go ahead, John.
I think this was from the last meeting. I think we were going to discuss talking about sending a letter to the district regarding the budget discussion. That's all I had. I had it left over from last.
Okay. I'm not really sure what that was, so I guess we'll have to just move past it, Mr. Stanbrook. We were well-intentioned, but now we're both having amnesia. So at the time, it was incredibly meaningful when I asked you to put it on the agenda. Okay, requests for Matt Cahill Highway Director surplus of materials. Did you need us to take a vote? I think everybody's got in their packet the materials that he wants to declare surplus. Did anybody have any questions? Okay, seeing as none, I will entertain a motion.
So moved, Kenny.
By Matt. Second by Matt.
Okay, fantastic. Roll call vote. I'm sorry, the mind is going. Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Bloss,
Aye.
and Ms. Kemet, aye. Appointments and resignations. Frank Skellinger, Conservation Agent, Records Access Officer for an indefinite term, I assume tied to his employment, right, John? Okay.
Yes.
So I will entertain a motion.
So moved by Matt.
Second by Kenny.
Okay, roll call. Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Bloss.
Aye.
Okay, fantastic. And sadly, the resignation from Nathaniel Thomas Mill of an extremely committed woman, Sylvia Salas. I will entertain a motion with regret.
So moved by Matt.
Second by Kenny.
Okay, roll call. Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Bloss,
Aye.
and Ms. Kemet, aye. Okay, and old business, which everything old is new again. We've got state of outreach on override ballot question. I think we talked about that earlier. Again, I thank you, Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Stanbrook, for taking the lead and presenting factual information that people can utilize to make the decision that they believe is best for themselves and the town and the children. Mr. Sullivan, anything else you wanted to say on that point?
No, I haven't. I am going to try and get the FinCom together for our first meeting in a while to start our process of review and recommendations on the warrant articles, as well as sort of our first final pass through the budget process here. We were hoping to be able to sort of wait out until we were able to meet in person, but we're going to probably look at trying to meet virtually via GoToMeeting over the next week or two.
Okay, and let me ask you this, Mr. Sullivan. It's somewhat of a leading question, but I'll own it. Are you guys thinking about, and I preface this by saying, not paying for an advertisement, not trying to sway anybody one way or the other, but factually presenting as a FinCom the override article in the paper? You're thinking about maybe writing something to the paper about that?
We haven't discussed any sort of outreach other than the personal outreach I've done myself, or the outreach we have planned for the television and radio. But I think Mr. Stanbrook and I, again, we talked about, depending on how tempers are leading, it may be beneficial to do maybe a lead up right to it, with a question and answer or a final presentation, or one final go-to meeting the closer we get to the election, to even if it's I haven't talked to Ryan, but if we have a moderated go-to meeting where people can call in or join without it getting really out of hand, to sort of get the facts out there. And again, part of the problem is on Facebook, there is no fact checker. There's no, there are some citizens out there who have, their own opinion on how things should go. There also are, on Facebook the other day, there were 2 town officials from, I'll say one school committee official and a finance committee member from Whitman who were actively on the Hanson pages, pushing, I won't say disinformation, but they were pushing an agenda. So, it's important to get as much outreach out there as possible. I would ask that, all of you are very well connected with your constituents. I know it's a tough thing to sell, in an election year, or you all have to answer to the voters, but I think you all, very well understand where we are and the message that needs to go out to the voters and the populace. So I would just ask that, any and all opportunity you have to get that message out there. No one's happy about it. I'm not happy about having to go for an override. It's not what we like to do. But I would just ask everyone, team effort, even if you just talk to someone in passing with your mask on, to really.
Yeah, I think it's tough, Kevin, because it feels a bit like we're eating crow. It's a really tough sell this year, to have that school budget be as high as it is while we're moving to statutory. And it feels like, although some have brokered the compromise and some in Whitman have supported the compromise, it feels very much like it's really Hanson mostly compromising. And then so to have that $800,000 override, I think to everybody is just sort of like, it feels like they're eating crow, like you're adding insult to injury. I don't mean you personally, but like we're adding insult to injury by asking for it. But that's why I'm hoping a factual presentation of look, that we're not resorting to histrionics, we're not getting crazy and and doing a Chicken Little type of situation. We're just literally presenting, here's what's going to happen. And this board has said it before, and we've said it again, and I know you know this. We will do the best we can with the money that we're given. That's all we can all be asked to do at the end of the day. But I just hope that folks really realize pros and cons of the choices that they're making. So thanks, Kevin. And I thank you, John, too. Okay, regional school agreement update. There isn't any update because the regional agreement committee has, I don't know, I guess it's been mothballed. I really haven't got any official read on it, but I know we haven't met. Mr. Stanbrook, did you have an update on that?
I just had a quick email I received from Mr. Lynham in Whitman, the town administrator, and he sent me the articles that were related to the district, and I'm not sure if everyone got that. I think you did. It was just the wording of the articles on the Whitman annual town meeting warrant. And I don't know if you saw that, if you did see it, or it is out there. It's a little bit of an update of what the wording that they have. I don't think you have it, Kate. I just got it yesterday.
Did they, I'll be right at you, Mr. Bloss. Did they change the wording to their article, like specifically the articles that involve us in any way?
Is that directed to me?
Oh,
it's directed to me.
Yeah.
I don't know what the wording was to begin with, but I've only received what they have right now on their warrant. So I don't know if they've changed the wording or not, but it is the wording that they're going to vote on. And I just wanted to make sure that the board had it and could take a look at it.
Okay, fair enough. But is it possible for you to ask Mr. Lyman to send along a decoder ring so that we know what did anything change? Was there anything significant? Is the amendment article the same? I'm wondering if you could just ask him to tell you what has materially changed, if anything, from what we've all been discussing.
Okay, I can do that.
All right, thanks, John. And you're going to send that all along to us if we haven't already gotten it. Okay, fabulous. Town administrators report, Mr. Stanbrook.
Okay, thank you. Again,
I'm sorry, John. I hate to do this. I did promise Wes that I would get to him, and I spaced out. Mr. Bloss.
No, thanks. I'm set. I would just suggest that these their amendments, their articles, just be passed through Kate also.
I'll
Yes.
certainly take a look at them. Yep. And I have what was originally in our warrant, so I'll do a side by side too, to make sure.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mr. Bloss. Okay, back to you, Mr. Stanbrook.
Okay, thank you. So the board voted that during this pandemic, I would be able to sign warrants on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. So I've signed the following warrants on behalf of the Board of Selectmen since the last meeting. A warrant dated 5/28/20, warrant 48 for $553,284.35. And that was a vendor warrant. 235,000 was 6 months worth of school article expenditures that we just posted, and $161,000, or again, these are round numbers, was the June's health insurance payment for the town. I also signed a warrant dated May 28th, 2020 for warrant 48 PR for $176,061.97. And that was a payroll warrant. Another warrant dated May 28th, 2020, warrant 48WH for $35,886.26. That's a payroll withholding warrant. A warrant dated 6/4/2020, warrant 49 for $95,597.92. That was a vendor warrant. A warrant dated 6/4/20, warrant 49 PR of $143,351.60. That was another payroll warrant. And finally, the last one dated June 4th of 2020, warrant 49WH, $27,237.08, and that was a payroll withholding warrant. Some old business. The board had asked me at a previous meeting to contact Mr. Ralph Greenberg at Impressed LLC and ask for an update and a timeline for cannabis manufacturing. We had mentioned it, and I think I had mentioned it in a previous town administrator's report, and I believe that Kate did reach out to Mr. Greenberg on some other issues and did talk to him about this. He did say that his provisional cultivation license application had just come up for the Cannabis Control Commission for review. And because of that lag time it took him to actually get to get his application ready to be reviewed, he'd like to act on the cannabis manufacturing license process as soon as possible, because it looks like there's at least a 9-month or even longer lead time. Again, some of that could have been COVID-19 related, but it's still they're moving. They're not moving swiftly. Let's put it that way.
Can we just hold right there for a moment, Mr. Stabrook? So I know, logistically, I mean, this is an issue that we had quite a bit of discussion about. We had a very vocal group of people who were opposed to the grow facility, and I think it's likely that those people would also be opposed to the manufacturing, to expanding into manufacturing. But I think what I'm trying to figure out is I hear that Mr. Greenberg wants to move forward with this, and certainly I think we can all appreciate we are in times when we need that revenue. So we'd like Mr. Greenberg to get up and running on his already approved permit to grow. I mean, Kate, does he need to go through all the same requirements that he did before with the public hearing, and then we've got to have a hearing? Like, what's this process look like for him to move to that manufacturing from a grow facility?
Yeah, so it's a good time to think about whether or not you want to expand the use. And it's not, I mean, so manufacturing and grow tend, my understanding of the industry, tend to go hand in hand, and they're oftentimes together. It's not so common that you have a grow only facility. And the reason being is that the waste involved, and I can't claim to be the expert in the processing or all that stuff, but there's ways to use the waste from the grow facility and manufacture it into usable material. So it makes for a more economically viable entity, and that's why they tend to go hand in hand. He, on the cultivation side, still needs a special permit. And so once you've gotten past the stage of, okay, we're going to allow cannabis passive uses in our town, which we've decided in Hanson, then the HCA, you bang out the financials. That's all pretty easy. The special use permit for the grow facility is real, where all the technical specs are presented. It has the peer review. You look at your HVAC. You look at how is the water being circulated. All of those really technical engineering pieces are looked at. And so he could, if the board were inclined to give him an HCA for manufacturing, he could present that engineering information in a comprehensive way on both operations in a single application. But he would still have to come back to the Board of Selectmen for an HCA approval, either by amending the existing HCA or creating a separate HCA, and also the licensure piece, which is similar to your liquor license. So it's an opportunity. They're coming back regardless for the special permit, just on the cultivation side, but it is an opportunity to say, do I want to entertain this, at least on the HCA side, on the manufacturing, and understand what does this mean in terms of impacts for the town? Do I want to entertain it or not? And then you have a determination of how your special permit application will look.
Okay, but so do we need to go through that public outreach, the hearings and all that? Because, my concern there is, as much as I want to try to move it forward in as much as he's already gotten the HCA and, we've already had the votes, et cetera, to move that forward, I'm struggling with how to do that in the current environment and have a robust, open dialogue with people who might have concerns.
Yeah, so for the initial HCA approval, that again isn't a hearing. It's just a meeting of the Board of Selectmen, which can be televised the same remote way. And it's pretty straightforward. It would be an overall presentation, and it's pretty easy to do because there aren't technical explanations. I mean, there's some overview, but not a technical explanation of what's going on. And then they have to have the community outreach meeting, which isn't our meeting. It's their meeting required by the state. And the state has said that they can do it remotely, and they provided mechanisms for them to do it in an ADA compliant way and all of that. They can do it remotely, and it's legally permissible. And I don't know how the original outreach meeting went in Hanson, but my experience in other towns, having heard, I actually never attended one because they're not ours. But they're not well attended anyway, to be honest, because
these were not well attended, and they went well above the number that they needed. They did like 5 of them, or I don't know. They did quite a few of them. They weren't particularly well attended. Our selectmen's meeting was fairly well attended when we talked about the host community agreement. But okay, so can I just go around and see whether the guys what we want to do while we're in this kind of limbo land? Mr. Dyer, thoughts on this? Should we be trying to have this conversation? Should we be waiting till we get through town meeting? What are your thoughts?
I think right at the moment, the financial situation that we're in, I don't think it's wise for us to turn away any new income for the town. So I say let's start the process. As Kate said, it's legal. As you said, they have different ways of reaching out to the community. I think that there's no reason why to hold up on the process.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Mitchell?
I agree 100%. This is a business that could possibly generate thousands of dollars to the town of Hanson. And I think we should schedule a meeting, have the company come in, explain to us exactly what they want to do, but I'm for it 100%.
Okay, great. Mr. Hickey?
Absolutely. I agree with Kenny and Matt. Let's get it going.
Okay, and Mr. Bloss?
I agree.
Okay, agreed. So, Mr. Stanbrook, I'm sorry to have butt into your town administrator's report. We didn't take a vote, but I think there's a general consensus that we want to get this popping sooner rather than later. So I don't know if if we've got sufficient time to try to handle this on the 23rd. I'd certainly like to get that going.
I'm not sure. We'll see I don't know how lengthy the time frame would be. I'll probably be calling Kate tomorrow morning and talking about it. We'll see what we can do.
Okay, great. Thank you. Proceed with your report. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, that's okay. So a new business, a monthly financial report. Again, the Town Administrator Act requires me to render a monthly financial report to the board. Town Accountant Todd Hassett has been providing me those reports monthly, and now I've passed them along to you, and will continue to do so each month. And if you have any questions, you can just send them to me offline. I'll forward them to Todd. He'll be able to answer them. He's doing a great job for the town. Town hall reopening. So since the last meeting, all employees have come back in and assessed their workspace. Each employee's temperature is being taken every day as they come into the building. It's usually by me. Sometimes I think it's by Greer, or sometimes it's Gil in the Board of Health office, but someone is doing it to every employee as they come in. Plexiglass and other protective equipment have been installed. Hand sanitizer, masks, and personal protective equipment have been received and distributed. Excuse me, the last step would be for us to put up required signage, developing some sort of cleaning regimen, and then having Gil Amato, the health agent, kind of review our policies and procedures so that we're following the proper guidelines. Just want to make sure we're doing it right. As Town Clerk Beth Sloan said, next Wednesday we do have voter registration. I was thinking of using that. I think it's a short window of time where we would be open. I think it's a couple hours in the afternoon, a couple hours in the evening. I'd like to use that as a test. Have the town open. We have to have everything ready before that date. If we're not ready to do that, then we won't do it like that. We'll have to come up with something else. But I'd like to at least try for next Wednesday to be a test for that small window of time and see how it works out. Again, the public will be required to wear masks while in town hall. They'll have to observe social distancing, hand sanitizing. It's the stuff that everyone knows about. And I was thinking of coming back to you at the June 23rd meeting and just reviewing what happened on the 17th. Maybe talk about how we can continue. Maybe it doesn't go well, and maybe we have to take a step back. But that's at least the plan going forward at the moment, using that small amount of time on the 17th where we have to be open as a test. Again, it'll be one way in, one way out. There'll be arrows. There'll be spaced 6-foot spaces where people will have to stay from each other. So at least test it out with that. And just so you know, town hall will have been closed to the public for 3 months and a day, and that was a very quick 3 months, or it was a very long 3 months, depending on your point of view. So that's where I'm going with that. On that, I was not successful in obtaining a small relief partnership grant from the Attorney General's office to help businesses with COVID-19 related costs. I think I talked about that in a previous meeting. I had applied for the grant. The grant was to help small businesses pay taxes, utility charges, rent, or mortgage expenses related to COVID-19. I still want to thank the chair and the state rep and our state rep, Josh Cutler, for letting me know about the grant and lending the support during the process. You don't get grants that you don't apply for, so at least you gave it a try. The town's Facebook page is up and running. The address is www.facebook.com/town.of.hansonma. It's starting slowly. We're hoping to build on it as we go. Our IT person, Ryan McGonigal, has done a great job getting the site rolling. So thank you, Ryan. Estimates related to the June 27th $800,000 override are on the town's Facebook page right now. So if you'd like to go there, or it's also, I also put it on the town's website. You requested that, I think at the last meeting we had, that you wanted to have me put some calculations on there. Also, I'll be attending the grand opening of the Regional Old Colony Communications Center, or the ROC, in Duxbury tomorrow morning. I think it's 9:30 in Duxbury. The town will be switching over to the Regional Communication Center on July 1st. And anyone wants to know more about what the ROC is and what they're going to be doing, you can go to town.duxbury.ma.us/regional-old-colony-communications-center. Again, end of the year reviews are usually done when we review different town vendors. Things like town council, labor council, town auditors, etc. It's going to be tough to do with this so much going on at the moment, but this is usually the time when you review vendors' performance throughout the year. For example, our auditor's contract is up for renewal at the end of June, so I will be working on those reviews as time allows. With our town meeting moving to July 20th, we must have a 1/12 budget plus to submit to the director of accounts. And again, the plus is because we don't just take amounts that are required to be paid throughout the year and just take a 1/12 of it. We take what things are required to be paid in July, regardless of what the amount is. We don't just take a 1/12 of it. For example, I think we talked at the last meeting. I think our pension assessment is due July 15th. We can't take a 1/12 of that. We have to pay the whole thing up front in the first month. Several Massachusetts Clean Water Trust Fund debt payments are due in July. So that you have to pay the entire debt amount. You can't take a 1/12 of that. So that 1/12 budget has to be submitted to the Director of Accounts for approval prior to June 30th for July of fiscal year 21. So again, town accountant Todd Hassett has prepared the town's 1/12 budget, and it'll be $3,663,407. And I'll have that budget ready for a vote by the board at the June 23rd meeting. The budget has to be voted on by the Board of Selectmen and then sent to the Director of Accounts prior to July 1 to allow the the 1/12 budget to go forward. And finally, almost done. Plymouth County amounts to Hanson under the CARES Act for COVID-19 related expenses. I've talked about that the last few meetings. The school has amassed $56,238.20 of COVID-19 related expenses to date. And I'll be working with Town Accountant Todd Hassett again. He seems to be everywhere. Thank God he is. And Regional School District Business Manager John Tuffy to compile and submit those costs in a timely fashion. And just something that just happened, we received the annual town report back from the printer, so it does exist. The paper copies are available, and right now we're going to try to get the report onto the website and Facebook as soon as possible. But the town report is ready for distribution. And just on a personal note, it was good to see all the town workers back again in the building in some capacity. It was a long time coming. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, John. You and Gray have done an amazing job, as newbies on the block, suddenly hit with COVID-19. You've really kept everything chugging along there, so we appreciate it. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved by Matt.
Second by Kenny.
Okay, roll call. Mr. Dyer?
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell?
Aye.
Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Bloss?
Aye.
Ms. Kemet, aye. And thank you very much and stay safe and thanks for hanging in there. Talk to you.